What's up, brother? How are you?
Freaking trying not to die of heat stroke over here. It's freaking getting extra toasty over here in Arizona.
Uh, I keep thinking you're in the tri-state area, but that's not quite right, right? You're just familiar with that area?
Yeah. So I was born and raised here in Arizona. Well, minus the 4 years I was up in California when I was at Pendleton. But yeah, it's definitely dry here. Very, very dry here. Dry, hot. Heat is what we got.
Yeah, I had to train in Fort Huachuca in Sierra Vista,
Oh
and
yeah.
we were there over the summer, and it was like 100 degrees every day. And in typical military fashion, they made us like pull fucking weeds all day. But we were in full uniform, like no exceptions. You couldn't wear PTs, you couldn't wear the summer version of the I don't know what you guys call it, Marpat or something like that.
Yeah, my
We
bad.
Yeah, our version would be OCP's operational camouflage pattern, and so we had to wear the winters the entire time, and it was so hot. They of course had to follow the rules though and send us back inside after like an hour. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Sierra Vista, that is basically an hour and a half south for me, southeast for me. I'm more in the, I guess you could say Tucson, but I'm in Nora Valley, which is basically, an hour and a half away from, Phoenix. But yeah, I've been to Sierra Vista plenty of times over there. Did a lot of work down over there.
gotcha, yeah. Got Lenov joining in here. I'm gonna, you know, I like these other hosts, but like their people just like are really insufferable fucking spurgs in a way that's like not cool. It's one thing to bicker back and forth, but they really spurg to the point of like just this eternal like high school tier trying to get owns back and forth. Like they think they're the podcasters debating and they want to get their like own or something. It's just real insufferable there. So, and especially on this topic, I'm going to trust. Lenov, you told me yesterday you disagree with the premise, so it'll be good to have a Marchese general here. That I can trust not to fucking spurg if they disagree about it. So, welcome, Perp. Good to see you. I interact with you on the timeline a lot. Um, I think I met Perp for everyone here who's kept up with me too. I met Perp here through. I think we were both making like the gun tough guys point, and so it's really good to see somebody else understand and know that. So let's see how many people we got in here. We got 6. So I guess we could start with. I guess I'll try not to lay out my whole argument here. I'll try to go step by step. I want to say, firstly, I do lend charity to the idea, like where people get the idea that therapy doesn't work from. Like, yeah, it's like zogged up, it's like fagged up, it's feminist, indoctrinated up. You have like retards. There isn't really like it's hard to measure competency in something like a therapist because it's so abstract. It's so like immeasurable. How do you even start by saying, like, even saying therapy works? Like, how do you even say that? Like, how do you know it works? What does works mean in this case? So there's certainly charity to some of those ideas. I do agree that most therapists are incompetent. I think in any job, the majority is incompetent. Anything normally distributes. I'll say it is zogged up with like globo homo stuff, just like everything is, and that's not really an equivocation, but everything is globo homoed up. And I don't think women, I don't know the numbers exactly, but let's just presume women dominate it. Like, I do think women have an issue with therapy, with being a therapist, wherein they don't really have a problem solving approach. They kind of just they're, admirably, they're trying to just make somebody feel better. That's kind of like a lot of jobs they like to do and get into. But I do think they have a inactive problem solving approach. And, amongst a lot of therapists, a lot of them negate or disregard the original stuff of therapy, and that is the analytics of it, namely the analyzing the pathway of thoughts and behaviors to yield these behavior patterns. They seem to try to ignore that, and they want to just like repeat platitudes. I think this goes for all incompetent therapists, but I think women therapists in particular don't want to go the analytic route. And I think part of that is because therapists themselves are often scared of themselves and their own feelings. And so it follows that they're going to pretend that that's not even an avenue to go through. And if anything, them being a therapist is a pathology wherein they do that. They can tell themselves they are the credentialed expert, and therefore they could say, oh, psychoanalytic approaches are nonsense. And that way they can excuse themselves from deeply analyzing their own thoughts and feelings, and therefore keep them sequestered to the point of protection from feeling them, from thinking about them, and from ameliorating them. So I'll start there. Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, just recently I was talking to somebody, I guess therapy's more about talking about your problems, I guess.
Yes.
I mean, as simple as it sounds, but it's good because a lot of the times you're in your own head and it's good to like reprocess them, because a lot of the times when you're in your head, you make weird errors that you can't really comprehend by yourself. But when you talk to other people, when you actually try to like translate it or put them into words so another person understands, you see the errors, which you normally don't see.
Yeah.
But but a lot of the times the problem with women when they're a therapist is they don't want to make you feel bad. They want to immediately not make you feel bad
Yes.
because the whole, because the whole you feeling bad is like a taboo for them,
Yes.
because they're like, and, so a lot of the times what they're going to do is they're going to make a assessment in their head, and they're going to try to put you into that assessment, even if it's not right.
Yes.
And then when you correct them, they get upset because they hate being corrected.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Yeah, people rush to categorize things. I noticed this too. This is like what Barnes and Noble psychology is too. Projection, this. My favorite thing about especially when women say projection and narcissists, who the first person to come up with that was ding, 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 Sigmund Freud. And his daughter actually came up with the ego defense mechanisms. But it's so funny because they'll repeat that, and it's like, you want to know what else Freud thought? Women want to say projection and all that. You want to know what Freud thought about women? So, what is it here? Are you going to stay consistent with your little woman, I am woman, hear me roar thing? Or are you going to accept that, you're using something that ostensibly you can't use because it comes out of the mouth of a big fat meanie who hates women? And I'll say too, another point. Surprisingly, few people understand the difference between therapy or counseling and psychiatry. Psychiatry is a problem too. Like, I fully will lend credibility to the idea that, and you don't even have to have stats for this. This is just a rational inference that if there's a psychiatrist and a psychiatrist is like this half medical doctor classification, they often double as counselors. They do intake patients or clients, you should say. They do intake patients and evaluate them through talking to them. So it's ostensibly counseling, but it's actually not, especially because they make that evaluation in like that 1 hour or sometimes even 20 minutes. And then what do? They prescribe the medication. And it follows for people who are skeptical of therapy to be skeptical of that because they don't want to get like fucking nanobots in their brains from taking, globo homo drugs. They want actual help, and they, understand that drugs are a temporary relief for something that's so overwhelming. And if there's any idea of what drugs are useful for, it is to sort of make you functional in the meantime while you actively talk out and work out your negative feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and so forth, and then remove the drugs from the equation. But that's not what happens. The drugs serve two payoffs. For the psychiatrist, they get the money, right? They make their scheme deal like it always goes with medical. And the person receiving the drugs gets the payoff of immediate relief without any actual effort, without any actual cognitive discomfort or reorganization. And that's, to your point, that problem of asking for immediate gratification and immediate result. And, people always say this is like an immaturity thing. It's also a very deep instinct within us as a product of an optimization of energy. And so it often gets overlooked when it's not as obvious as when like a big fat baby kid is doing it. And so it follows that people will act that out without even knowing that they're acting that out. They'll take their drugs. They'll expect it to make them feel better. Of course, it's always just some kind of temporary relief. And really the operative difference there is they need to understand the difference between feeling better and actually arriving at a greater place of mental health, well-being, and fulfillment. So, Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, another problem that they have because they prescribe you drugs is the fact that people don't really understand what the drugs do. Like, a lot of people have problems with processing their
Yes.
emotions because emotions are really hard to regulate.
Yes.
So a lot of people have like how do I say, like extremes of anger and sadness and all that. It's kind of like bipolar disorder, but it's not as bad, but a lot of people struggle with that.
Right.
And the drugs, they top you off way too bad, and they kind of mute your emotions. And it's kind of like being a pseudo psychopath,
Yeah.
but yeah, but like psychopaths, they have ways to live with it because they've lived like that their whole
Right.
lives. So because the people are living a pseudo psychopath kind of life and they're muted, they start to get depressed. So it starts to get worse and worse and worse, and it becomes manic.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, nobody knows what these drugs do. Like, even, this is the meme of trusting the science, TM, is like they are people, so they don't fucking know everything. I always make the point, when they're like, oh, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. Like, don't confuse your degree with actual knowledge, because your medical degree, what was required of you, you had 4 years of gay butt sex parties in undergrad, and then you had 4 more years of gay butt sex parties, except rote memorizing, Quizlet fucking flashcards, and spitting out memorizations from webmd.com, and then they still are always looking shit up on fucking webmd.com. So it's all rote memory selling, and so no there's no like actual rational faculty and capability amongst this. They just kind of figured out these drugs. They just kind of had this loose uh inquiry to go down, to investigate the chemicals of the drugs and then investigate how they would interact with the brain and neurotransmit in the brain. And then they just kind of figured, okay, that neutralizes the neurotransmitter that's making big fat sad. But to your point, like, especially when you arbitrarily insert, or artificially, I should say, insert feelings like that, it's just chaotic. Like, it's just your brain has to react a certain way. It's, what if that feeling is suppressed, but there's something that would activate that feeling in the moment. Otherwise, like, you're just totally blocking any natural process, all for the sake of some sort of half-ass relief from, negative feelings. And libtards and these types, are forever playing victimhood games. So a lot of idiots, and a lot of the idiots who don't want to actually improve and better themselves in their lives, they will lap up this idea of drugs, because the premise of drugs is that this is some sort of cross neurological wiring in your brain that there's absolutely no possible way you could change. It's like a genetic birth effect that you absolutely cannot change. And isn't it always so funny how they're willing to concede that genetics are a thing when it is convenient? They'll pluck it. Genetics are true when it means I could take my drugs. Genetics are true when it means, whatever. That's why everyone should give me money. But when it becomes like, and not to go into alt-right politics, like every fucking space does, but of course, as soon as it becomes about something uncomfortable, then it's, oh, genetics aren't real. And so, that is certainly, so all that's to say that there is credibility in a generalized nebulous antipathy for therapy, counseling, psychology, psychiatry. And so, Wartorn, you go ahead and then I'll start talking about why I'm going to say it does work.
Yeah, a lot of the times you see this problem with liftards because they're always in therapy, but they don't go there to fix their problems. They just go there to numb themselves. And you see this a lot because they don't have any regulation for their emotions. They are totally fucked up. The immediate, like no, like the moment they lose that, they start to spurg out because they actually don't have any control over their emotions. It becomes so much of a crutch that they don't have the ability anymore. So they go in there with the lack of control and they come out with no control at all. It's crazy.
Yeah, they just subordinate themselves to these thoughts and feelings and all that. And that, one of the points I want to bring up is we get into why people say it doesn't work. So on that point, I'll say further, a lot of these alt-right heads think that therapy also is just you go in and you like cry. And a lot of people are sort of rightoids tend to have this like terror of the idea of not just I can't say vulnerability per se, although I'll get to that. They are terrified of this idea of like getting used to like being a victim or getting used to or getting comfortable with being like a victim or being on, having bad feelings. And they don't like the idea of getting comfortable with feeling sorry for yourself. So they have this strong anathema for therapy because they think that's what it entails. Now, what it's actually supposed to do, in fact, and this is when you have a good counselor, a good therapist, when your therapist is Marchese Methods, of course, and that is you actually investigate your uncomfortable feelings and you do go through your feelings, but really, it's actually not a pleasant experience. It's not pleasant. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. You're not going to feel like a victim. You're going to dig up any feelings that you sequestered or any feelings that you're unaware of. And you are going to trace back all of your behaviors and incentives for your behaviors to arrive at what emotion are you trying to placate, ameliorate, sequester, and so forth. And so, part of so that's the part where we have to understand that therapy at the very least can work in that you are actually the central premise is you have this outside expert's perspective, somebody who's trained in detecting these behaviors, self-sabotage and all of that. They speak to you, they talk to you back and forth, you would develop a little bit of a relationship, a little bit of a trust and rapport, and they prompt you to go down thought pathways that you have never gone down. And you're going to resist at times because it makes you uncomfortable or prompts negative feelings. You're going to rationalize. You're going to obfuscate, whatever it is. But all of that is a part of the process and in the work. And you will eventually arrive at a point where you can have that self-accountability and you do reconcile and recognize your deep underlying thought patterns, feelings, behaviors, and so forth, and why you do the things that you do, so that you can then process those feelings. And it's a strange thing. It's kind of hard to explain, but essentially you process your feelings by feeling them. But the brain reads negative feelings as sort of like a danger, as a sort of hurt, the same way it reads physical hurt as a danger. And so what the brain does is to protect itself from that hurt, those hurt feelings, is to develop these self-sabotaging protection mechanisms that ultimately yield you a miserable life. And that's how people arrive at therapy, because they vaguely understand that they're not happy with their circumstances, but they cannot understand how to get past it because on their own, they may never dive deep into their self-protection mechanism. So, Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, therapy is about growth and people don't understand that it's for both parties because when you go to therapy, it's supposed to be not only the person that's on the couch that's supposed to grow, but the therapist as well. But a lot of therapists don't understand that. So when things that are difficult come up, they don't want to talk about them or they close themselves off and they don't understand that when, let's say, when somebody else talks about something, a lot of the times you have to put yourself in their shoes,
Yes.
but they're like, oh no, it couldn't be me. Oh, I don't understand. So they always like judge before they understand the circumstances. That's why nobody ever grows.
Yeah, absolutely. That's to the point of a ton of therapists are incompetent. They're juvenile themselves. They haven't reconciled their own pathologies. Sometimes becoming a therapist is a pathology in and of itself. It's everything from the one I mentioned earlier, expertise. So I can just pretend I don't need to investigate myself because I'm the expert. I would know how to do that. I by default I already am figuring that out because I'm such a smarty pants psychologist. uh, it could be, just projection in a way. Forever living in other people's feelings makes it so that you're quite literally avoiding your own feelings. And so there's certainly merit in that. So I will say all of that is basically when people say therapy doesn't work, they're right when they're talking about psychiatry and they're talking about incompetent therapists and they're talking about, you know, whatever else we said. And so where it does work though is what we just talked about, the growth and the investigation into your own self-sabotaging behaviors and why you do them. And there's a further misconception wherein people abuse the fact that it's so abstract and so rational and so not empirical that they feel confident they sort of use that as a cope wherein they could feel confident in saying, oh, it doesn't work. What the heck is that? That's just freaking talking about your feelings. What the frick does that do? Especially these like beer and booze masculinity types. They just revel in the fact that it's not empirical and there isn't really like a easy way to measure all of this, especially with the word work, when you say therapy works or when they say therapy doesn't work, they mean, you go in and you don't instantaneously feel this like pleasure, euphoric, drug like happiness and it's all gone away and you're like happy as a clam. That's not what it is. Like, that's just not what it means for therapy to even work. For therapy to work, I would say the best way to summarize it is you arrived, you discovered yourself in terms of what you're doing, why you're doing it. You reconciled your compulsion and need to do it. You faced and expressed those emotions that you were avoiding. And then what do? The best way to say it is you arrive at peace with yourself. There's peace in terms of your life, right? You could go to therapy and you could be at peace with yourself, but you might not have a peaceful life because, I don't know, let's say your job sucks or something like that. But ultimately, the way to say that therapy works is to say that it arrives you at peace internally. Now, another reason that they say it doesn't work is they arrive and what they think work means is they think it means the therapist told me I'm right and my wife's wrong, or I'm right and my husband's wrong, or the therapist told me, that what I'm doing is great and everything and made me feel good, whatever form that takes. I'm right and my spouse is wrong, cheating's actually okay. Like whatever the fuck people do, or just these ego battles, they just want to be told they're right in these ego battles, so they think therapy working means that they're told that they're right. And when they're not told they're right, they're not even told they're wrong per se. That's not really our role. They just get mad and flustered because they were hoping that somebody with the psychology label could like analyze it and figure out, like, play psychologist and play the game of saying that they are right. So that's not what therapy is. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's not what it means for therapy to work. And I'll add a point, and this is my point, where you see that it's not even just like, oh yeah, I don't think therapy works. People online have this real, like, vehement hatred for they have this like aggression with it, this offense with it, if you try to say therapy works. And honestly, that's just by definition what it means to be scared. Like, that's by definition, I'm a big fat scaredy cat. I'm trying to come up with every cope excuse to avoid my negative feelings. And so I'll say therapy doesn't work because, whatever, it's in the abstract and feelings and blah, blah, blah. What the heck? It's just stupid bitches telling me how to feel. And so, you know, that layer to it is like 80% of the seethe about it. Like there's just no reason to even seethe unless you're like, big fat scaredy cat about it. So that's my train of thought there for the meantime. So any of you guys chime in. Go ahead, Linoff.
Yeah, just wanted to say what I think. When I say what I'm thinking about when I say that therapy doesn't work, is that you come there to fix something, and you do not fix it as a result of therapy. So, like the millennials who say they have depression and they are really somewhat low functional in society. They go to therapy for years and they don't become more functional.
Right.
So when that happens, yeah, it does seem therapy doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that actually reminded me of another part I wanted to mention. When those types, when they go to therapy, right, I already made the point of going to therapy because you don't want to feel better, right? But a lot of this stuff is so deeply ingrained in our minds, thoughts, feelings, brain chemistry, and all of that, like, especially if a dumb, or I should say more so a midwit, because a retard, can do fairly well in therapy because they're sort of intuitive. A midwit type, a millennial type goes to therapy because they really they don't want to get better. And so the other point I wanted to make is that a lot of times therapy doesn't work for people who aren't trying to make it work. And people get really mad about this point I'm making. And the point I'm making is essentially you have to be doing your part as the uh, client counselee. You have to be doing your part. And most people aren't going to do their part because it is uncomfortable, because it is terrifying and it's unpleasant and all of that. So they'll just continuously go to therapy, really more so to develop further self-sabotage and further pathologies. And the way, I could say it's akin to, the best way to say it, especially when you see one of those types of millennials, right, crying and being a little bitch, and they're like, yeah, therapy doesn't work. And you could tell they're just like seething freaks. I would say the analog is, it's akin to a fat guy saying, yeah, bro, gyms don't work. Like, I tried it and like gyms don't work. Or, oh, personal trainers don't work, bro. Like, I tried it. And it's like a fat person. And you could just feel, right? You could feel like you almost have like a psychical ability to feel and see like why exactly it didn't work. It's because they'll say personal training didn't work because without the the personal trainer trains them for the hour or something, and then they go and they still eat shit. They don't listen to the trainer. They don't train on their own time. They train that one time a week with the personal trainer, expecting it to get them in shape, in like sexed up freak beast shape, and they don't. And so like therapy is like the mental, cognitive, emotional version of that. So it is tricky to establish what the pattern is, or what the commonality is. Is the commonality that millennials aren't actively doing their part of therapy, or people who go aren't actively doing their part? Or is the commonality the therapy in and of itself? So that's really like the crux of that argument. And I'll say one more point. I was making this point with some seething freak, however long ago, online here in replies. And one of his memes was, well, you see, the surest sign of a cult is you saying it doesn't work. You have to, if it's not working for you, you have to believe in it harder. You have to, try harder and all that. And it's like, dude, anything anywhere isn't going to work if you don't try hard enough. Like, I don't understand how that makes something a cult. And it's, the cult thing, you could at least say believe, using believe as the operative word, but this isn't believe. This is thinking things through. This is actively working, like, and this is true of like the brain. There's a tangible thing that happens in the brain, and that is through neuroplasticity. Your neurons literally rearrange. Like, it's not even like that abstract a thing. We know from neuroplasticity that your neurons will literally rearrange. That's a lot of what learning is. That's a lot of what thinking is. Your neurons connect and rearrange, and they break connection if they haven't used that pathway in a long time. And so all that's to say, essentially, that therapy, like joining a gym membership, you still have to work out. Therapy, you still have to like actively work on yourself by thinking through your thoughts and feelings and analyzing yourself to the point of arriving at what these feelings are, feeling them, and going through them. And anybody who says the cult meme, the cult thing, that just doesn't connect actually. And the sure sign of a cult is saying if you don't believe hard enough or if you don't try hard enough, then then it's you. It's not the cult. It's like just calling it a cult just by that standard. Like you could call anything a cult, anything wherein you have to try hard enough. So, Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, when you're in therapy, you can immediately feel the difference between somebody competent and somebody incompetent. A lot of the times, even a regular conversation can change your life. I've heard a lot of times when somebody has a conversation with me and I don't even try to help them or anything. I just show them that their way of thinking is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times they come back like, let's say months later, years later, and then they say to me, "Oh my God, dude, this thing that you said really helped me out. Then I changed my life and everything." And I don't really try to help them or anything. I just, it's just them.
Yeah.
They just they just get like, what is that word? They just get lost in their own sea of their own, processes. And sometimes a little thing that's wrong just messes up everything else. Sometimes it's only like a little conversation that you need.
Yeah. And that's really, part of it too, part of what that is too. And this is actually evident in therapy and counseling. And that is that like a real foundation, like what really, really makes it work quite a bit. Because you think about it, okay, well, why can't I just teach myself to do this and then, be my own therapist and then figure it out and all of that? There's this fundamental need of humans to have relationships, and quite literally a therapist is somebody you develop a relationship with. And if it is a good relationship, and obviously that doesn't mean like sexual, right? We usually use that word exclusively for sexual relationship, but a relationship, a sort of friendship, mentorship, whatever you want to call it, if that relationship is good and strong, that is actually it's been demonstrated that is really the crux of what makes therapy works. And if you think about it, to your point, it makes sense because people can look up information all day, but when you look up information, there's this sort of absentness to it. You're not really like feeling it. It's not really striking you deep in your heart. And when you're interacting with a therapist, though, and you hear a therapist say it in the context of your relationship, or even sometimes to your point, when your friends have said something in the context of your relationship, it completely, it strikes them at the heart. It strikes their emotions such that it prompts that alternative pathway and feeling and all of that. Because part of it, too, as much as we're talking about rationality and analytics and analyzing your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, it also has to like strike. There has to be some kind of emotional spark that really flips that switch. And, there's all sorts of predecessors to it. One of them is feeling those negative feelings. And then there's another point at which, and we all know it, we've all had this experience wherein something was said or we thought something that just sort of sparked us to completely reorient our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, livelihood, and so forth. Any other thoughts on that? I'll say when people, and I appreciate you. Go ahead, Lena.
I just wanted to add that it isn't just that the guys who are the fat guys in the analogy uh, who wait, let me get back. The millennials I mentioned who
Yep.
go to therapy and don't get anything out of it are not only the fat guys in the gym analogy.
Yeah.
They are also the the middle-aged women who just go to the gym, get their filthy goodies, and still don't change anything about their body. So
Yeah,
about their brain in the therapy context.
yeah,
But they still love it. They still love it. And I think this is what entails this perception of therapy as a cult, because they love it, but they don't get anything out of it. So it does look like a cult from
yeah, absolutely.
these people.
Yeah. And the key distinction there is using like feeling good as the barometer. You know, they use that as feeling good, and like they're obviously like fucking retards and living their little retard life still. You know, they love it, to your point, and they're so happy about it, and they recommend it to everybody. And it's like you could tell that their like overjoyment with it is because it's providing them some sort of cope payoff, some sort of excuse or whatever, or some sort of feelsy goodsy, you know, especially when women go to a women therapist, it's just like fucking girls wine and cheese hour. So you're absolutely right to point that out, in that like it's pretty clear whether it's millennials or whatever characters, you know, and you know, it follows to investigate, okay, well, how do you know for sure that those that are like that are saying it does work and they're just like overjoyed about it in a way that makes it look like a cult, or the people who, you know, for whom it obviously doesn't work because they're still depressed and miserable and so forth. It follows to ask, well, how do you know that they're coping about it and all that? And that's when you get into the abstraction of it. You know, human behavior and interpreting people's thoughts, feelings, communications, body language, and all that. It's something so deep that we all like very, very much understand, but it's simultaneously abstract and very difficult to describe. You can tell, like, not just even by the face or something, right? We see it on here all day. We could tell how many people on here are just like, even when they're not seething per se, they're just here to like live in their gay little world and, you know, cope or whatever. And so, you know, there's an element to it wherein you can trust like the abstract rational faculty to surmise or infer that for those types, you know, they say it works or they're overjoyed about it, but it's really more so just because they're just getting some kind of payoff, and that payoff is coming from incompetent therapists. You know, the therapist, it's a pathology for the therapist, him or herself. You know, girls hour, fucking girls gossip hour, you know, going in complaining about their husband, and then the therapist telling them, you know, yeah, you're a bad bitch. And you know, of course, every fucking woman in the world is going to say, yeah, I love that. You know, oh my God, therapy is the best thing. It made me feel my worth, which was really just code for it gave me an ego boost. So you're absolutely right to point that out. It's kind of like it really needs stronger standards. It needs to find some way to measure the relational capability of possible therapists. Some kind of like IQ test element to it, because the coursework isn't hard. I could tell you the coursework isn't hard. And, you know, like it's one of those things where it's very good for people who intend to go in and it's right for and everything, and they find a good therapist. And it's absolutely a disaster for people who are like coping and seething about it. And, you know, they go in to just feel good. That's really the premise. And then they'll say if it's great, and you and others rightfully pick up on that, like that's obviously not what's going on. Like it's not working. They're not better. They're not less miserable. They're just sort of masquerading as such. So absolutely. Anybody else, or you could keep going? Has anybody here tried therapy or counseling or some version of it?
Not really. I mean, if anything, I went to the VA a couple times, right after I EAS. That's not to say that therapy doesn't work. I think it's beneficial to some people that need it.
Yeah.
But I guess you could say my therapy, counseling, psychiatry, um, was like when I was going to the VA, but it would just shove me with another medication and all that. So, but again, I'm not against therapy or counseling or any other thing if it's going to help a certain individual. I mean, so be it.
Yeah, and not everyone's at a point at any given moment where they need it. You know, you might have kind of like a shitty life in the moment, but if you got it kind of figured out, you don't always need therapy. And, kind of the idea of therapy, right, is to send you off on your way anyway. You know, obviously you just can't be in therapy your whole life. Like that just doesn't make sense. You know, even if you have problems, you're kind of the idea too is in part is to equip you to self-regulate. So absolutely, yeah. Wartorn, you go ahead.
I don't go to therapy, but I talk to somebody that's on the same intelligence level as me a lot of the times, and they lived a different life than myself, so I kind of use it to see what I would do in those situations. It's just like it feels like talking to myself in a way. So it's good because it kind of like helps you process that.
Yeah, sometimes having a friend is, your friends are enough, but, even if your friends are at the same intelligence level, they may never investigated this pathology stuff. And this is evident in, you'll talk to your friends about this stuff and they'll try to like, give you advice and something, but, you could feel when it doesn't stick because it's not really related, and all of that too. And, if you just spent years of your life like living in whatever self-sabotage or something, it could take quite a bit of time for the therapy to actually cross over to you figured it all out, you feel better, you ameliorated, you came to peace, you started being able to have relationships, so it's kind of it is like the mental and emotional version of the gym. And you know Lenov mentioned earlier, there's also it even when there's somebody who says it doesn't work or something, and they're not ostensibly like just a freak or an idiot, like middle-aged women saying they love therapy, or like whatever you could kind of tell when somebody's like just coping about it, right? We talked about that. And even when somebody isn't so clearly coping about it and they say therapy doesn't work or something like that, like it is kind of like akin to there's the gym guy who says the gym doesn't work, and they're, let's say, just they're not in bad shape, they're sort of skinny, they're not fat, they're maybe even the mediocre type. It's a very hard thing to detect when somebody's like relatively like functional and normal and they say therapy doesn't work. It's very hard to detect that they're actually coping about it. And that's not to say that everyone's coping about it. I think therapy is not going to work if you don't need it per se. Going to therapy when you don't need it is like going to Alcoholics Anonymous when, you never had a problem with drinking. Like it doesn't help, but it doesn't hinder. Like it's just not for you. Uh, and, you know, there are people for whom it won't work. And that is the set of people who are either already equipped to solve their problems. They really don't mesh well with somebody who is not the same. Like if they can't establish that relationship with the therapist, it's not going to work for them. And I'll say too, I'll even lend charity and say people with like a very high IQ, like they need a high IQ therapist. If not the same IQ, much higher. You can imagine somebody with a 130 IQ going to like a 110 IQ fucking therapist and speaking to their problems, right? And somebody with a 130 IQ, like they're going to read up on this stuff beforehand. They're going to investigate psychology. They're going to problem solve on their own sometimes. So they're going to go to a therapist and it's going to feel to them so fucking insufferable to basically have to explain to the therapist how to be a fucking therapist that they're going to say, yeah, this is a joke. And by nature of having a high IQ, it's rare to meet other people with a high IQ that'll match yours such that you can establish the relationship necessary for therapy to work. So, Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of the times when you have a higher IQ than the person that's administering the therapy, the thing that happens is the person that is supposed to be getting the therapy ends up doing the therapy for the therapist. So the therapist is the one that
Yeah.
becomes, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's therapists are supposedly trained to be conscious of that, but they'll just do the memes of just being either an idiot or selfish, and then they'll just pretend that wasn't a part of what was told to them or what was taught to them to avoid, and they will follow with just playing their little game out to get therapy, to your point. And there is like, you should like what you do, right? So you can yield some kind of cathartic effect from being a therapist. You can find fulfillment in it, and there is like an emotional payoff to that, but it's in, it's conditioned on aiding the success of the other person. Whether or not that made you feel any certain way is a different element. So yeah, you're absolutely right that many of them are just becoming therapists so that they could get therapy from somebody else. So yeah, it's real tricky to tell. Like, I mean, it's evident that people are coping about it when they're like really seething about it and like losing their mind on fucking Twitter about whether or not therapy works. And especially these, the masqueraded masculinity guys, they're just lapping up the opportunity to say it doesn't work and it's dumb and all that, because they do this gay linear association thing of, feelings woman, not feelings man. So more not feelings equals more man. Therefore, I'll say, oh, therapy's fucking gay or whatever. So those are the obvious coping, classical cope theorists, but the people who can kind of rationalize why it doesn't work and it didn't work for them and that sort of thing, it's much trickier to ascertain whether or not it really doesn't work for them, or they're just still trying to avoid and sequester their negative feelings as a self-protection. So, any other thoughts? I know I have father of five. Keep on coming in. Perp, you go ahead.
Yes, bruv. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Hanging in there, brother.
Excellent, excellent. So I had a couple of questions. Did you sort of finish your main thesis? Because I can chuck them in at the end if it works better for you.
No, I didn't well, my program doesn't require a thesis anyway. It's just credits and all of that. So, but
Sure.
I got another year or so.
Okay, yeah. I meant in terms of the space, did you finish making all your points? Because I got a couple of questions, but I can save them till the end if you prefer.
No, go ahead.
All right. So first question is, I feel like 10, 15 years ago, CBT started becoming quite trendy.
Yes.
And maybe like in the past 5 years, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy.
Yes.
What do you think about those? And then also, incidentally, since I mentioned DBT, I've heard someone claim that, I think it was a chick who came up with that, and I heard that allegedly people were saying that she believed that personality disorders could actually be cured. So what's your thoughts on like CBT, DBT, and do you think personality disorders can be cured? And is that a correct attribution to her?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of integrated approaches and all of that. A lot of times what winds up happening is, you could think of it this way, is that every therapist is going to sort of land in some bucket of approaches, psychoanalytic, CBT, DBT, and that sort of thing. And you're going to, it's almost like, kind of like how craftsmen and carpenters or whatever, they have their own brand to it. Like you have your own brand to therapy. And so you're going to bring together a little bit of everything. So I pull from psychoanalytics and psychodynamics. I pull from CBT. I pull from DBT. I would say the best way to say the Marchese methods of therapy, right, is there's an operative telos of eyes on the prize, which means that if you really truthfully, just as long as you have this self-honesty of, I know something's wrong with me in my life right now. I want my life to be better. I want to arrive at a better life. I know that, what the fuck else am I going to do? If you sort of have that operative telos, you're really already 80% of the way there, because if that is truly like to the depth of your heart what you're trying to do, it'll follow that you will work through CBT and DBT and all of that. You will investigate those thoughts and feelings, and you will, CBT, right? So you rethink your patterns, you redo your thinking patterns. And so that's certainly a part of my approach. I certainly condone that. I have to really investigate uh, the exact methodologies and everything again. But I would say the only thing I'm really against in terms of approaches is just any form of just like putting a Band-Aid on it, any form of putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, so to speak. And that is like the drugs and all of that. So yeah, absolutely. Good question. So I guess in summary, yeah, I'm pro DBT and CBT.
Cool. Did you want me to give you another question or?
Yeah, whatever you got.
Okay, so I'm going to ask about, let's say the certain backgrounds that mysteriously keeps recurring in a lot of the people in, psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatry. I'm going to preface that, and cause I'm the nicest guy on twitter.com, as I'm sure you've seen from my posts.
Yeah.
I'm very philo-Semitic as well. I'm the nicest guy. I just love them. I will say in fairness that
me too. Right on. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Elon, give us more money.
Yeah.
So the most positive feedback I've ever actually heard someone say about therapy, a friend of mine, he's, super successful guy, but he's like a black guy who came from like the ghetto in Chicago, and he sort of got himself out and really rebuilt his life.
Yeah.
He actually said, funnily enough, and he was probably in his 30s at the time, the best, therapist he ever had was actually like a 50-year-old Jewish guy, married, like super conservative. The way he put it was like he was super red pilled. So I think I'm going to preface with that, to be fair.
Yeah.
But then my actual question is going to be, how do you approach researching, looking into these topics with that skepticism in mind? Like, do you kind of, like, one extreme would be, okay, the author is ... I'm going to ignore that or even reverse it.
Yeah.
The other extreme would be, I'm going to purely try and be meritocratic and evaluate it on its principles. And then like a middle position would be, okay, I'm going to be aware this is dangerous waters because I might be getting pooned by a word cell who's really good with language and good at weaving tricks.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try and take that into account and figure out the merit. Like, what kind of approach do you take when you're approaching literature? And I guess also with women as well. Like, is that a factor too?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, there's, I'm glad you bring that up. I forgot to bring that up because, there's also our corner of the internet that just is so philo-Semitic that, they just love that Jews just originate in quite a few things, and particularly therapy. And I would say, it's just kind of like anything you investigate, when it has that kind of influence. And, I actually really like Freud, ironically, but there is like, how do you maintain being like an edgelord while also liking Freud? And, you'll see that it's just, you get so red pilled that when that influence is there. And basically whenever that influence just says like the standard stuff of like, if there's therapists or psychologists trying to say transgenderism is correct, or there's nothing wrong with that, homosexuality is like a legitimate thing and not a pathology, and, therapy or therapists or approaches that try to say, be anti-Christian, and, all the like weird gay butt set, like just the weirdly sexual stuff, that's just kind of like anything that just leads you to basically like some version of anti-white, anti-Christian, weird sexual morality or weird enablement of sexual deviancy, you'll say, but for example, because Freud, what does everyone know about Freud, right? The Oedipus complex. So it would follow to suggest, oh, well, that's kind of like Jewish to, play this Jewish game of enabling or suggesting that it's like legitimate for it to have these like weird sexual obsessions and compulsions. But there's a layer to that stuff where, thinking about like what people when they operate like sexually and all that, there's this like we're all pre-programmed to have the sexual element of us eventually evolve, right? And so like the neurology of that is still there when you're a child. It's just not expressed fully because it's not hormonal and that sort of thing. You don't even know what like sexuality really is. So you could think of like when there's something like the Oedipus complex or the Electra complex, you could think of that as not so much as like an actual active, I want to bang my family member, but more so an intense desire to possess, right? And that's a lot of what our sexuality actually is. We are possessing the other person. And so how that is and how that complex works is it's a strong desire to possess the mother. And it's not because of some sort of sexual desire, but rather a sort of desire for her because she's the source of resources, and specifically the resource of feeling better, feeling good, food and all that stuff. And the way that we associate strong desire with food and all of that is how that complex develops. And then you know how the story goes. You want to possess, and the child vaguely understands that the mother belongs to the father. So then they try to slay the father. They try to defeat the father so that they could take possessively. And then the rationalization is, okay, well, he's too big and strong for me, so I can't slay him. But perhaps there are other of these creatures called women in the world. And so I'm going to be like him so that I can then go find a female that's not possessed to possess for myself. So in summary, there's this Jewish influence, this even Talmudic influence, like however you want to characterize it, this very degenerate version of Jewish influence, you could just always pick up on when it's present by just going through the standard heuristics of like, what are they actually really trying to say and enable? Are they like just saying transgenderism is real, homosexuality is real, advocating for these weird sexual things, anti-white anything, anti-Christian anything, anti-Christian ethics anything? You could just sort of dismiss it as like Jewish, but sometimes Jewish intellectuals do just sort of, it also follows to regulate on when they do posit sound theories or ideologies or rationalizations. So absolutely good question. I'll let Wartorn go and then you could ask another one.
Yeah, a lot of the times a little bit of common sense will help you sniff out when something is propaganda or not, because a lot of the times propaganda doesn't follow the right process of like, I don't want to say communication, but like a lot of the processes that are supposed to happen in the brain, you can actually feel the influence trying to influence you.
Yeah, it'll feel like artificial, and it'll feel like it's the classic game of like the devil where it just sort of indulges you. Anytime it indulges you, you could safely say it is a Jewish influence, which is awesome, by the way. Fucking awesome. Let's go. So yeah, great question. You could go ahead with another one.
Okay. Thanks for your answers on those two as well, by the way. So another question would be, I think you kind of touched on this very briefly, but I don't know if you had anything more to say. So I've posted before about how there's certain careers where people tend to go into them because of their own past history or because of insecurities or traumas.
Yes.
So like, you'd be shocked how many of like the champion like UFC fighters and stuff, their stories like, oh, I got bullied at school, or I was the skinny kid, or like the therapist who's completely fucked up in the head.
Yes.
Stuff like this, like often people's insecurity drives them into the field.
Yes.
So in my opinion, and I'm a horrible sexist meanie, unlike yourself.
Yeah.
You're very, I know you're very blue pilled on women, you believe in the Disney fantasy and you've never had a negative word to say about any woman ever. So you might disagree. In my horrible sexist opinion, this kind of feels like it's probably true for like 95% at least of therapists who are women.
Yeah.
Would you agree or disagree with that? And then also, do you think it's a big difference for male therapists, or do you think it's the same story?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I'm totally with you on that. Yeah, I definitely can see, I definitely lend credibility to the point that, you know, like majority of people uh, are just sort of eternal coon brains. And especially, therapy and the degrees and all that don't really filter for that. A degree like math or something, and this is why I'm really glad I studied math originally, is because it filters for that type of thing. Like, you just can't be a coon brain and pull off a math degree. And I shouldn't say that because there's probably a ton of fucking Reddit insufferable midwits, but at the very least, it's little bit of a better filter for that sort of thing. And so the majority of people are eternal coon brains. You're absolutely right that majority of people do have their negative feelings and they reconcile them. And in the UFC case, what's interesting is that in the UFC case, like, let's suppose, not in like a bad way, right? Because the term cope is usually like this negative connotation, but right, like, when they're coping, like, you still can't become a UFC fighter without becoming a fucking good fighter, but you can become a therapist while being a shitty therapist. You still can become a therapist and be a shitty therapist. And so you're absolutely right that many of them, just like most people, are eternally living in their own feelings and trying to reconcile them, going through alternative, like, doing everything they can to ameliorate those bad feelings without actually having to do the serious work or thought process and all of that. And to your point about women, women's eternal battle, truthfully, is to stop relying on their feelings to inform every last thought and decision and behavior. But women, very, very, very few women outgrow that. Men kind of outgrow that partly because they're gifted with a little bit more of a rational faculty, but there's something to the male essence of their want to arrive at truth, and they want to, like, sort of play hero and help authentically. And it follows that there's this authenticity to that amongst men more so than women, that they want to actually achieve the task, achieve the goal. And if that requires that they reconcile their own hopes and thoughts and feelings, they certainly will. But you're absolutely right to posit that, just like anything normally distributes. And so you're going to have the normal distribution of therapists as incompetent. Therapy is a crutch for them to play out their own little games and pathologies. And when that's inauthentic, they are getting something out of therapy instead of giving something during the therapy. So, yeah, all that's to say, in short, that there is a problem to detect wherein therapists are playing. And I'll actually share with you some stories. So I went to therapy. And funny enough, so the first one I went to, he was like a totally fucking based and epic and alpha Catholic fucking bro. He left the area, so I had to find somebody new. And I was like in and out of school and everything. So, but I was still not really fully in touch with how I wanted to live my life and everything. So when I was at college, right? Colleges offer therapists for free, by the way. And so I went to college and I told myself, this was my part. I said, I'm not going to request any specific kind of therapist and everything. I'm going to say that if I want this to work, I can't sort of have these preconditions for it, in that, I can't say, well, meh, if it's a woman, I don't want to because whatever. And so, but it was a woman. And there was just such a stark contrast wherein, and, I'll try not to give myself away about some of the things I talked about, but you could just, the world she lived in and the way she took offense to some of the things that I said and the way that she just could not get past that. It's like, dude, seriously, like, isn't your whole gimmick supposed to be like, and it's just so interesting to me too, like, you should take offense when somebody disrespects you. This idea that no offense at all costs is like the life telos. Like, you rightfully, it's within your right to take offense to what somebody says, insofar as it's actually disrespecting you and attacking you and your character and your identity. But if somebody says something about, oh, men this, women that, like, it's just kind of gay and like very like ego driven to take like strong offense to that. And so that was my experience seeing like a woman therapist. And then funnily enough, you mentioned you had a friend who saw a Jewish therapist. I saw a Jewish therapist, and he was actually like a total fucking Chad. You had to be like a level 5,000 to even know he was Jewish by his last name, because otherwise you looked like a total fucking Aryan. And so, I worked with him, and that was kind of like my last experience. And he absolutely, like, the biggest part of it was he like challenged my thoughts and beliefs and discomforts and put me in a place of discomfort. And so, what I can say to your point, and sorry if I keep going on too long, but what I could say to your point is, yeah, there is a competence problem. There is a therapist is playing a game for themselves problem. And there is a women rely on their feelings to inform their decisions problem. And what the consequential behavior is, if they have some sort of negative feeling or whatever that they're trying to figure out, and they deploy a self-protection mechanism that's inauthentic and at the expense of the person in therapy. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Sorry. One more. So I'll tell you another one. So I'll say, I don't want to tell too much intimate detail, but I'll say this. There was I had a family member that I had issues with, so we go to the therapist, and he plays this game he plays those like tough guy logic games, and it was just like right away, like I even said to him, I was like, I'm not playing fucking logic cornering games like that. What is this about here if you're going to do like debate bro logic corner me games? And so, you know,
Sorry, is it the therapist or the family member? Sorry.
yeah, that's okay. The therapist was playing this game, and I could even tell. I was like, "You're trying to impress her, like just straight, like just instantaneously." I felt like I was the psychologist. I was like, "You're trying to fucking put on an act. You're putting on the act of, oh, I'll wag my finger, I'll get the kid in shape." The masculinity advertisement of, "Oh, I'll get this hecking kid in shape. I'll get this kid, I'll show him, I'll discipline him." And I'm just like, I almost like was going to say like, dude, she's not going to fuck you, bro. Like, I almost felt like I had to say that. So all that is to say that you are absolutely right to be skeptical. And, if you're going to search for a therapist, you definitely need to evaluate. And, it's a tough skill. Like, if you feel like you're socially keen, you will be able to evaluate whether they're doing that. But if not, yeah, for people who don't really get that, and then they go, and then it's a game for the therapist, and then they come out and they say this sucks and this doesn't help. And, that is just going to be, by nature of a normal distribution, the majority of therapists. So it takes a little work to figure out which one is going to fit with you. So sorry to take forever answering that question. I'll have Lenov go ahead, and then you could ask again, Perp.
Yeah, one thing about this uh, complicatedness of proving competence, it may be just the death of academia, because it's
Yes.
like that in every field, but in psychology, psychiatry, therapy, it's just the most evident that you can have that degree and not even be competent within that field.
Yes, absolutely. There's a huge standards problem. There's a huge competence problem. I could even share with you guys, and I tweeted about this a while ago, and I'll try to make this point quick. I had a teacher in this program, and she was like just the most Reddit midwit fucking coded insufferable fucking faggot with this cite your scholarly sources. And the question was like, the exercise was, there's a video, and it was a therapist and a guy, and the guy says, yeah, blah blah blah, I'm trying to come to therapy over addiction, and but one thing I'm concerned about is, through repeated efforts, I'm not sure if the therapist can help me if they haven't experienced addiction themselves. So my question to you, the therapist, is, have you experienced addiction? And then the therapist says, yes, I have. I'm in recovery now and all of that, but I want to let you know it's my training more so that makes me more able to help you. But I'm in the interest of developing a rapport with you and trust with you. I will tell you that I am in recovery. And so the exercise is to disclose or not disclose. And like, I just gave like a basic fucking rational inference of, yeah, that might betray the ethics codes of put the client first, because if you're in recovery and you're still kind of dealing with that, you may very well make this relationship about you instead of about the client. And that's like, according to the code of ethics, wrong. And she was like, source. So I was like, what the fuck do you mean source? Like, what? How do you source that? Like, you really think what study would even specifically say that? Like, how do I even fucking find that and scour that across the internet? And she like sourced me on like 500 fucking things. So I was like, dude, I like here's what I did. I arrived at truth rationally. This doesn't, seem to be something that needs a source or whatever. And this falsely presupposes that like, nobody can have a rational inference anywhere. Like like the very first study that said or I guess I should say this, it's like inductive, because it's like if I cite the source, okay, well, that source had to cite sources then, and then those sources had to cite sources, and then it's just like, so who the fuck was the fucking first source? What do we do? Can we ever just like pull truth out of observation? So it just was to say, this is to say that she's just like living her own little pathology, the classic like Reddit fucking thing of, I'm smarter than the average person. I attach my identity to that. And so anything that threatens that, particularly when coming across somebody who can arrive at truth rationally, that threatens me, because part of how I attach myself to my smart identity is empirifagging. And so when that's threatened, I have to like launch my psychological onslaught on that. So sorry to keep that long forever, but all that is to say that there is certainly an issue of competence and curriculum and gay retards, just infecting the world of therapy and becoming therapists. So you can go ahead with your thoughts or next question.
Bro, I'm creasing up over here. Like, I love to hear like Redditors' heads getting literally or metaphorically flushed down the toilet. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's go. I fucking hate them. Yeah.
So next question would be, so imagine if instead of a bunch of crybaby Reddit faggots, everybody had access to Marchese, therapist.
Uh-huh.
In this hypothetical utopia, what percentage of people would you say should be going to therapy? And how does that distribution break down between like people who should maybe do, I don't know, a few months, a year or two versus people who need years and years, or I guess you touched on, you don't really think therapy should be lifelong, but then I guess there's a question of, is there maybe some people have personality disorders
Yeah.
or, so in that world, would you be like, oh, like 99% of people should go to therapy for years, or would it be more like 10% should go for 6 months, or like what would we be looking at?
That's a great question. Just like loose estimates, when I was in the Army, I had a friend, he was like this, this was when I really became aware of like the midwit bell curve, in that what was just so funny was like he was like really fucking stupid. Like he was an actual, like he had to have an IQ of like 70 something, but I got along with him like so well, and like everything he said, I knew what he was talking about. He just couldn't articulate it, and he had this very keen sense for social dynamics, and he was very keen on picking up on all these sorts of things that his enemies, the faggots in the unit that would be on his dick, could never pick up on, because they're fucking midwits, and they try to rationalize everything they can't really understand. So he was like the prime example of like the low IQ, but arrives at truth because he has a deep intuition. He could feel truth, and he's aware of that. And so one of the things I said to him, because he was dealing with like girls and stuff, and he was talking about this and that. And I said to him, I was like, listen, because I was 25, 6, 7 at the time. He was like 20, 21. I said to him, I was like, your job in your 20s is to unfuck yourself from, your teens. And so that hints at my philosophy, my telos about this. And that is that I do estimate, I would say roughly 80% of people, well, actually, I would say in the Marchese Method's utopia, firstly, everyone, I'm the only therapist in the world and everyone's going to me and the government pays me. You don't even pay me. The government just pays me thousands of dollars a month, so everyone's, can come to me. And so that's the first part of the utopia. I would say maybe like everyone, 100% of people go through some kind of, almost like a routine checkup, like a doctor checkup, like once a year or something. And it's a real evaluation, not a 20-minute one, but maybe like an hour or even 2-hour evaluation wherein they check in where they're at. And that starts, I would say, in adolescence because the idea there too is you can nip it in the bud. There's a lot of brain development in adolescence. And if in adolescence something's going wrong and you nip it in the bud, that'll, even if you're doing that throughout their entire adolescence, they won't have to spend years in therapy in their adulthood. So I would say 100% of people have some kind of check-in throughout their adolescence with a competent, presuming competence and everything, Marchese methods, good therapists, some sort of routine evaluation. And then from there, they start to get evaluated and filtered into, how much do they need to be seen? How often? I would say the therapist should be available to them too if they feel like they want to come to the therapist. So 100% throughout adolescence, routine evaluations. And then I would say from there, it just filters to 80% of people are probably going to need, especially like 18 to 24-year-old age, because I'm sure, as you know, 18 to 24 is when personality disorders actually develop. And, personality disorders often are consequential to trauma in and of themselves anyway. So 18 to 24, let's say, just rough estimate, reduce it to, I'd say 80% of people probably need to spend around 6 months to a year at least in therapy. And then following that, maybe of that 80% remaining, or of that 80%, probably another 40 to 30% really have to spend like a year, 2, 3 in there. And then it just like steeply probably drops off to anywhere from 5 to 20% of people doing much longer term counseling because they're like really like the old school hysteria, like had to be hospitalized because they were just like totally schizoiding out or totally just, dysfunctional in society, like just cannot stop themselves but fucking commit crime or whatever. So in case anyone missed that, I'm estimating 100% of people routine check-in throughout adolescence. From there, 80% probably get filtered to 6 months to a year of counseling to ameliorate any of their issues and personality disorders. The more serious development issues, personality disorders, probably need to spend anywhere from like 2 to 3 years following that in counseling. And then everything from there is just like totally people who are just like really dysfunctional and all of that. So great question. I love it.
Thank you. Do you want another one?
Yeah, go for it. Unless anybody, I guess anybody, if you have thoughts, you could just raise your hand. So you go ahead.
Okay. So again, you touched on this with gender and with IQ. In what ways do you think the therapist and the patient should be similar? And in what ways do you think they should be different? So e.g., I don't know, race, age, you obviously mentioned intelligence, gender,
Yeah.
religion, etc., etc.
Yeah. There's, this is actually addressed a lot, when there's a value differential, because that's just, you just like really struggle to establish a relationship like that. Like for example, and there's like a whole section of like, there's a whole Christian therapists organization, because of that, because of how values and living by your values deeply integrate into your psyche and into your confidence and well-being anyway. One of the biggest confidence issues is people, it's not so much like they don't get pussy or something. It's rather not living by their values insofar as doing the right thing every day. When you promise yourself to do XYZ right thing every day and then you do it, that's true confidence. Like that is one of the key premises of confidence. And so it follows that values play a huge part in that. So I would say like ranking it, I would say they've I wouldn't say they have to have the same IQ. I would just have to say the therapist has to have the same, at least the same IQ. And then from there, it's either the client has a lesser IQ in any version. And like a rough estimate, like there's got to be like an IQ minimum of probably 120 for therapists, I would estimate. I estimate I'm in like the 120 to 130 range. I won't take an IQ test though, because God for fucking did I wind up in the 100 range. It's going to be so over for me. But I would say, like, in terms of credentials for the therapist, like 120-ish IQ that we could test, not just IQ test for, but even just like competence testing, relational testing. I would say a requirement of every therapist has to go through therapy themselves for whatever amount of time. And I would say there has to be, between the two people, I would say above all else, a value alignment. And I think that makes sense for us, right? Because we're like, fashy goy and everything. But there is kind of like the meme of like the racist group of friends, and they're all like completely different races. And so there's an interesting phenomenon where people, do their value systems, like libtards do have a little bit of a point of like, if you really do have very similar value systems and personalities, like you will get along even if you're on different teams, proverbial teams. So I would say next down would be same value system. And then I think like race and culture and where you're from and all of that will probably play a role, because, Whitey Whitesmith, I'm Whitey Whitesmith. I can never really, there's something to white people wherein, although we're doing like the internet thing and the alt-right thing, like we really do have a low in-group preference. So we really don't like place as strong an emphasis on it as even in our hearts and our souls and how we feel about it. Like we know we have to team up and everything, but we don't always feel this strong identity and feel like our experience in our identity is all that effective to us and all that relatable with the other person. And so I know I'm not going to really care for it that much. And I know that sounds like gay and libtard coded, but I would say next level down certainly has to be some element of racial demographics, because many people feel very strongly about their identity and will just forever sort of see a therapist who is on the other team, so to speak, proverbial team. They'll always see that as, they can't relate to me on certain things. They'll never be able to relate to me on certain things. So IQ first, value system second, race, demographics, that whole consortium third. So I'll let Wartorn go ahead.
The IQ for the therapist can go all the way down to 100 as long as they understand the patterns in the mind of the other person. They don't have to be like super smart. But the one thing that is important is that there cannot be more of a separation than 20 points of IQ between both of them. The person getting the therapy can be smarter or dumber as long as there is a separation of maximum of 20 IQ points. Because if there's more than 20 IQ points, the biggest problem becomes the people can't communicate. It's literally like a different language that they're speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, is that actually like a hard line? That's like, in the, not to be gay, but in like the data and sources and stuff. Is that I know the 20 IQ points thing. I've heard that before, there's like a huge, you're basically speaking two different languages.
Yeah, it's 20 IQ points. I think when you get to the higher levels, even 5 points is extremely different.
Yeah.
So like it's the processes in the mind. IQ is literally like not just how fast you can process things, but the amounts of connections in the brain of a person. So if I have an IQ of 140 and I'm with a person that's 110, they're talking about something and I'm already like 5 steps ahead. And I have to go back and translate, and it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah. I'll just say, not to butt heads with you, but I'll just say, I think the reason why I say the 120 plus IQ because I think at that level, they're conscious of such a separation, such that they can translate or they can speak the language of the idiot, as insufferable as it is for them. But, because the nature of the relationship is a helping relationship. So it just sort of follows that if the therapist is above the, like, I'm just loosely estimating that a 120 IQ is like the cutoff point for a therapist to be able to have the analytical faculties to your point, see the behaviors and thought patterns and all of that, see what's going on and understand it. And, a 120 IQ can speak the language of a 100 IQ. It's just insufferable and irritating. But not to butt heads with you too much or anything. So if you want to respond, go ahead, and then Perp can ask another question.
Yeah, it's okay. As long as how do I explain this? It can be 100 because a lot of the times the simplicity itself is the thing that more complicated people need. Because I like myself, I tend to overthink things, and sometimes a more stable way of thinking is the thing that helps you. You know what I mean? It's not the biggest problem with going to 120s and that stuff is you tend to get more midwits in that range.
Yeah. That's a good point. 120s can still fall victim to empiricism fagging, and 120 pluses, to your point, I think they certainly can. Like, midwits definitely overanalyze, but like they overanalyze in the gayest way because they're just sort of like circularly analyzing. They're not really going deeper. 120 IQs, they'll have a client, and then even I do this. Like, they're just eternally ruminating about the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of the other person, and they might very well be overlooking like there's just a simplistic element to it. So yeah, great points. Perp, you could go ahead with your next question. And anybody else, if you have any thoughts or anything, just raise your hand so I know you got something. Go ahead, Perp.
Yeah, just to add on to that last one then. Yeah, I mean, I think in theory, like the therapist can be lower IQ, but probably when someone is being therapeutic and they're below 120 IQ, they're probably not going to get into the position and be running like a practice. Some of the most therapeutic experiences or memories I have are stuff like, working in my granddad's garden, is like allotment with him. And my granddad, like, he's absolute fucking legend. And like, in terms of like social skills and like conscientiousness and life success,
Yes.
absolute fucking legend. But, the really big IQ gap, even when I was a kid.
Yes.
But some of the most therapeutic experiences was just us in the allotment for 8 hours doing some gardening. And we'd maybe say, a few hundred words to each other, and he'd say how things going, or you're having trouble at school or stuff like this. And like another example would be like if you go to say like a gym or a fight gym or something like this, like there's obviously a selection effect, especially with fight gyms and obviously with CTE as well coming in. Like your coach isn't, your trainer's not necessarily going to be like a super, like 130 IQ genius.
Right.
But he's gonna have trained like hundreds or thousands of people depending on the level of involvement.
Yes.
And he's gonna know all of the little copes, all of the little tricks, all of the little, you're being a bit of a bitch, you keep closing your eyes because you're scared to get hit, but you can't see what's going on. So I think these people are really, they're doing something that's therapeutic, but we just wouldn't call them therapists. And the other thing I'll say as well quickly on that point is I think we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back and be like, oh yeah, I'm whatever IQ. I need someone smarter because I'm such a special little boy. Like, actually what it is IQ isn't intelligence. And if you're truly intelligent, you can learn from, you can learn from a fucking animal. You can learn from like watching a tree in the breeze. So I think it's actually maybe partly a reflection on the arrogance of people who are high IQ and their lack of humility to actually accept guidance from people who are low IQ, but maybe have more wisdom or experience.
Yeah, great points. I'll say, a lot of the right wing type stuff is, and not that you're saying this, but they make the point of, oh, okay, therapy, what do you need that for? Just go to the gym, go fight, go make friends or something. And now the distinction there, though, is that is like a part of fulfillment, happiness, and an overall better mood and everything. But the actual like catharsis of reconciling like your issues and self-sabotage patterns, and if you have some sort of I don't want to use the word trauma, but mainly what therapy is ameliorating trauma, and you could lift all the weights that you want, but that still won't resolve if you have like a deep pattern or thought or feeling from an experience or whatever, or from a bad thinking pattern. And it sort of is a part of your overall happiness, but the distinction is, being in therapy is to resolve these self-sabotaging issues that you still behave with anyway. So Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, the reason why I'm so adamant about the 100 IQ thing is because when I was growing up, I knew this boss, and like a lot of, like he was 100, I'm really sure. But one time he said something that was really smart that stuck with me. When I used to work, I didn't used to like think about anything. I just thought about work. And one day he's told me, I want to ask you a question. And then he's like, what do you think about when you work? And I didn't understand the question. It was so foreign to me. So I just told him nothing, just the job. And he's like, I don't want you to waste your time just not thinking about anything. I want you to like learn about things. Even when you're working, even when you're walking, even when you're doing anything, think about things so you don't just like stay dumb like 90% of the people in the world. So they do have something of value. Everybody
Yeah.
does. The thing is, yeah, but like, if you're high IQ, let's say 140 to 160, you're going to be too proud and you're not going to listen to them. And that not listening to things that are smart, even if they're from like lower IQ people, is a sign of stupidity.
Yeah, definitely good stuff. And, I'll amalgamate my response to both you and Perp. And then I got you V there. Perp makes the point of the sort of like therapist, not therapist, the helper, the helping relationship, the mentor relationship. Like sometimes that in and of itself is the therapy, and sometimes those people in your life, like as a matter of fact, like basically are therapists, and they're just good with people and good with relating to people, because there's that relational component. I had a friend, I call him a friend, and it's funny because he's like 50 years old. He was that for me in my like first few years of adulthood. I'd see him at the gym every night. He was too fucking funny. I call him every once in a while and everything too. And he was a huge influence on me. Um, you know, not, there was something I said to him once that I'll never forget. And I said, basically, I said, I've never been that guy that accomplished X thing. I won't say what it is. And he was like, no, but you can be. And I'll never forget that. That was like such a spark for me, just to have that person believe in me, like just the feeling of he sees that, like he looks at me and sees that, whereas I'm convinced everyone looks at me and sees like failure or something like that. And all it takes sometimes is somebody else like thinking something different about you than you think about you, can totally transition that and can be quite literally like surrogate therapy. And I'll say, you guys bring up the good point about the IQ differentials and all that too, because like these types will, there are like midwit type. I shouldn't say, when I say midwit, I'm really talking about the 110 to 120, just like arrogant type Redditor. The 85 to 100 type, those are always kind of like nice people for the most part. And so, but, they pick up on things just as well too. And if they're 60 something and you're 20 something, like just by, uh, what's the word, convergence, they're going to detect truths that you haven't detected yet. And so it follows to listen up on that, and it follows to allow them to be a surrogate helping hand relationship person. So I know I go on for a while. So we V with the sword there, you go ahead. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, wait, first of all, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So I just find this interesting because, being a young adolescent man, they call it being a sensitive young man nowadays.
Yeah.
I've been through the whole public school curriculum here in America and getting put onto Adderall and all that stuff for
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yep.
It's a whole process, and it feels very smarmy and, patronizing a lot of the time. So,
Yeah.
like you were saying, and like Pert mentioned, sometimes being in the fight gym or doing manual labor with a buddy or your brother can be therapy. But my question was more pertaining to the types of therapy that we were talking about. Like, when I think of therapy, I think of all the, quote unquote therapy I've been to, which is sitting in someone's office. They have a degree in behavioral sciences on their wall and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
they're talking to you. It's very, you know, talk therapy, like you're talking through your
Yep.
emotions. Is that kind of what mostly you're talking about, or just anything in general? And what would qualify someone being a based therapist? Would it just be someone who refuses to, um, you know, use like therapy talk and talk about gender and racism and stuff, or would it be like, excuse me, the Andrew Tate style of like quit being a pussy, grab
Yeah.
your nuts, stop being a faggot, like
Yeah. Great
yeah.
question. And so when I call myself base therapist, a kind of funny way to say it is like I get it, but really based therapy would mean just applying an actual problem solving approach that is absent just indulgence in feelings, indulgence in bad behavior, indulgence in globo homo. So like politically, like you're definitely just on the side of Christian, you're on the side of anti globo homo. You consider the homosexuality and stuff like a pathology. I'll say on the Andrew Tate stuff, there is like a motivational component to that stuff, but I think we're all men here for the yeah, we're all men here. I think we all understand that that type of stuff is a very fine line to walk, at the shame line. And you can certainly shame yourself to influence your behavior. There's certainly an accountability to that. But I always say, the discipline or the shame and all of that, it's not the better way to say what Andrew Tate is saying is not to just self-flagellate until into oblivion if you even thought for a moment for the day about not going to the gym or something. I'll say you just want to focus so much on doing the right thing instead of flagellating yourself for doing the wrong thing, such that you just forget to do the wrong thing. In the gym example, you arrive at a point there where it just becomes as much a part of your day as brushing your teeth. It's almost like you're on autopilot just going to the gym, but you're still making the active disciplinary decision of I'm doing this because it's right. And now a lot of, to your point, the rightoid type sector of the internet tends to have this like rightful existential fear of no shame because they think in the absence of shame you just become shameless, which uh, vocabulary wise that is true, but you know you're not really going to become absent shame. You're always going to have that there. But if you rely exclusively on shame to get yourself to do things, you're really just going to develop an awful self-image and self-esteem and all of that. So all that's to say, based therapy is problem-solving approach, not indulging in globo homo, and walking the fine line of shame such that you don't allow somebody to shame themselves into total oblivion by focusing more so on just getting yourself to do the right thing instead of flagellating yourself for doing the wrong thing. So, great question there. Anybody else? John, you go ahead.
Yo, 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 what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Hey, my man. All right, Mr. Methods, I probably should have saved the hand raise. If I sound out of breath, I'm mid-workout.
Let's go.
And I'm trying to hold a poop in, trying to, keep it up in the upper stratosphere so it doesn't drop
Yes,
down
you
hard.
can.
But point I wanted to make is a good conversation. I wanted to jump in on this. Kind of my hang up coming into this conversation or coming into listening to this conversation was the whole idea of what is therapy? Is therapy like the last
Yes.
V, like V just said, right? Is it sitting down with a guy and, doing the whole laying down on a couch? It all started when blah, blah, blah. Or is it literally just like making a new friend and like having a new experience? I've been to therapy. I did the lay down therapy. That sucked. I thought it was gay, blah, 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 whatever. Probably
Yeah.
points that have been made for the last hour that I didn't hear. But the best therapeutic thing that I've ever done was meeting a good friend of mine. I was about 16. This guy was like 21. And it wasn't, this guy was smart, right? And I don't want to play the IQ game. I think that's been overplayed. But this guy is smart. But it wasn't that he said smart things. It's that he said courageous things, you know? Is that he broke out of his
Yes.
shell and he broke me out of my shell. And that was really like the therapeutic opening to me. So I could talk to many, I've known many smart people. They've said many smart things, but nothing connects more than a legitimate spiritual act of courage. So I guess my
Yes.
question is like, where are we getting this idea of therapy from? Because
Yeah.
in my opinion, I don't need to lay down and talk to some PhD again. What I need is to make new friends and go like, you know, vandalize shit and go climb roofs and like have great experiences and learn about life, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the origin story goes so hard for us. Yeah. Well, I'll say that like the lying on the couch stuff is just some sort of like supposed technique type stuff. Like the setting is, well, I'll put it to you this way, like, because that was me and you, and when we met and everything, it was, we would also speak to each other about these things. It was just in a different environment. It was in the Comanche environment, and so it was emulating that relationship. It is, to your point, essentially at its core the relationship. So whether it's in a specific office or at a summer camp or something, and it's somebody that you meet, the relationship is a core to that. And if that person is somebody that you can relate to, which we obviously did, and if that person is sort of like you know I think we were like the perfect storm, so to speak, for it, because I was like the unobserved. I was like in a way like an image of your ideal, and not that you look up to me too much and everything, because I know you're Turbo Alpha, and I know the implications of that sort of thing.
I actually hate you. Yeah. I'm coming after you.
But there's a layer to it wherein when you see somebody's behavior that is what you strive to be, you just almost didn't know it yet until you saw it. It follows that it has a therapeutic effect wherein you could just see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you could see what you want to be. And what comes with that is you adjusting your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and all of that. And so that is to say that in the off, like whether it's we picture it as the office environment and laying on the couch and everything, and you tell them things that are bothering you or on your mind or something, but ultimately it is a relationship, and it is a helping relationship. And the forms that it could take that form. Perp made the point earlier about like a boxing coach. Like it is like just any form of the helping relationship, the look up to relationship, the almost like a father or in some cases mother relationship. And ultimately you do become like, I'm friends, like the therapist I told you guys that I saw, like I'm like literally friends with him. Every once in a while him and I just like meme out, especially on like all the based and red pilled stuff, and talk about how like women shouldn't vote and stuff. Like we literally just do that. And it's, it's a friendship essentially. So yeah, that's a great point. It's go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I like, so that's the very, very clear cut example. And obviously it's inherently personal. So it makes more sense to me in that way. But I guess like my question, I'm going to guess the answer is no, obviously, because, you probably explained it 1,000 times before I got on this.
That's okay.
But like, is the like sit down therapy not like the emulation therapy, but the actual sit down, like, here are the studies, here's like the philosophers and blah, blah, blah. Is that not inherently like masturbatory?
So you mean that you do that just to sort of get off to the sensation of talking about your like girls' hour, basically, like
Yeah.
sit and chit chat and that sort of thing. Yeah, well, that gets to the separation of people, the rightful idea of the rightful skepticism of when it doesn't work and why it doesn't work. And there's I won't say it's inherently masturbatory. I will say that it is the equivalent of, it's kind of like how gym bro culture, right? You know, gym bro types go in and what do? They just sort of get off to the idea that they're in the gym and they're cool guys and tough guys and all of that. And they don't fucking do anything. They don't challenge themselves. They want to like meme on Instagram and all that. It's inauthentic. You know, so this is like what you're getting at is like the cognitive emotional version of that, where it's people go there just for the sake of getting some sort of rise out of it. But when it is actual a problem solving ethos, a problem solving approach, you certainly it's that's when I say it does work. That's when I say it's not that. But for most people, you know, everything normally distributes. So I would say for most people that you know you're not wrong in being skeptical that that's what most people do. And I'll say the image of like sitting across from each other to talk, like that's just like one way of like doing it, facilitating it. You know, it could be like through a walk in the park or something, so to speak. That image is very like, you know, old school, but you know, it can take, you know, I don't know, I guess a more fresh environment and all of that. So all that's to say that it does depend on intention, but you're absolutely right that most people's intention is to just fucking have girl talk and girl hour and just like, you know, emotionally masturbate, so to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you even kind of subtly mentioned it before, like it's like feelsy goodsy hour. You know, I think you said that in one of the previous like monologues you were doing.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other hangups for me is the fact that, you know, you say problem solving, right? There's a problem that needs to be solved.
Yes.
Then why do we keep going to therapy? You know, like that it kind of implies that you're using it as a crutch. There's some kind of, and you know, because we've talked many times.
Yeah.
I'm very anti-addiction. I
Yes.
don't like the idea of leaning on anything permanently.
Yes.
I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything for that reason. I don't do caffeine for that reason. I don't
Yeah.
like the idea that I need something to be normal.
Yes.
And so therapy goes the same way. I think a lot of people, and I'm assuming you would agree with me because you're saying most people who do therapy are gay, right? But like if you keep going to therapy for the same problems that you're not solving, are you solving a problem, or are you just masturbating based? Are you just feeling
Yeah.
good over and over? Now, one final point is that, you know, before there was therapy, before there was sit down therapy, there was confessions. There were, you know, you would talk to a priest about your problems.
Yeah.
He would tell you the solution to your problem. You would make amends. You would go out and fix it, and hopefully sin no more. And if you do, then you go back, right? It's kind of like upon sinning, you go to your therapist. But
Right.
these people, they have, oh, here's my Tuesday session. Here's my Tuesday session. Almost implies like I'm still stuck in this problem, and I plan to be stuck in this problem
Yeah.
for, you know, the time being.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the trick. And I got you one sec, Caesar. That's the trick. That's the game. And it's a really tough thing to do to really sort of construct any argument against that, because this is all happening in the abstract. So, you know, you can't, it's all an inference. It's an inference as to somebody's behavior. And you rightfully deduce that if you're forever going to therapy, you know, then, you know, what are you doing? Like that it just deduces to you have to be just like getting off on it in some way and not even really solving any problem. So, you know, if you didn't hear it earlier, like I definitely make the point that like, you know, everyone eventually stops going. Like I stopped going because I didn't feel the need to. Like it just, the problem was solved. I'm much more at peace and everything. To your point about the religious component, you know, the religious component helps, like it was the therapy of its time. Like they are spiritual leaders, and there is a component wherein therapy or your issues with self-esteem and everything come from not living righteously and not living rightfully. And so it would follow that there's a spiritual guidance too that priests are often equipped to give. And a lot of that has to do with the spiritual, like the lizard brain stuff I talk about, the living, you know, to reconcile the working out and what that does for you and all of that. That's also coded like for living by God, living by Christ, because what does it mean to, you know, a lot of people's self-esteem issues is with, like, to your point, addictive behavior or feeling good and pleasures and all of that. Like spirituality is just or a priest and the Christian component of that, that is just the spiritual and transcendental explanation for why and how you don't do those things. But I'll say that the difference between the priest element is and the therapist element is that the priest can help you with living righteously and reconciling your guilty behaviors and all of that. But if you have a self-sabotage protection mechanism wherein you do something like let's say like promiscuity, right? Just like a very basic pathology. Like promiscuity, you can go to a priest and confess and it's wrong and everything, but the righteousness component of it doesn't really stick with you. And that's not to say the righteousness component is incompetent or incapable, but that is to say that is because it doesn't strike you at the reason you're doing that behavior. You're certainly doing it to be a coon brain, but you're also doing it because you have a basic pathology of you need multifaceted sexual approval from women because let's just say, I don't know, your mom didn't love you or something. So to make up for that, to prove that you're worth love from a mother, you emulate that by having sex with multiple women, and the more women would imply the more love. So that's like this weird like empiricism in the head. So to answer your question, there going to therapy endlessly is just like masturbatory, and there's a spiritual element to your well-being that is a priest is fully equipped to handle, and confession is fully the process for, and that is when you feel bad about yourself for committing wrong acts and your incentive for committing those wrong acts was just some sort of deviancy or coon braining and all of that. But when your incentive for your behavior is self-protection mechanisms that are deeply buried, that you have to work out and feel through and everything, that's when a therapist is more so equipped to handle. And that's not to say priests aren't equipped to anything. They're very holy. So in a way they're equipped to do anything for you, but that this is the distinction here. And final part is there is like a much stronger body of Christian therapists. Like there's Christian therapist organizations now that are a much stronger and more prominent body, surprisingly. So my school that I'm learning this at is a Christian university. So I'm sure you have a lot to say to that, but I'll let Caesar go ahead first. So go ahead, Caesar.
Hey everybody. Hey, hey, can you hear me all right? I know it's probably kind of loud right
Yeah, I
here.
can hear you.
Let me know. If not, I'll drop out. You sure? Okay, cool. So listen, man, I love this topic. I think it needs to be talked about more, especially in these channels, because it's one thing that we don't explore. I love the question that the gentleman before had, because those were my similar reservations as well, going into therapy. So I'll offer my experience and my olive branch here is that if anything, you know, well, actually, let me preface it with one thing in case some were not present, because I think you said something really key, man. Like a value system. If you have a congruent value system, and for me, like a gender, like the person needs to be the same gender. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like for me, it's like same gender, same value, congruent value systems is going to go a long way, or else you're going to be you're not going to be on the same program, on the same page. You won't subscribe to them in that regard. But the value that I got from it was, a recognition of, of potential destructive patterns, or unhelpful patterns in your life. Just really, that's the talking element. My therapist, we actually went and did things. So we go to the batting cages, do stuff like that.
Let's go.
So it's definitely yeah. We do like batting cages, we do golf, we do all kinds of shit. Obviously, we would do the clinical environment just to check that box. I'd say the bulk of our therapy was actually doing like more interactive and tactical stuff where we could just kind of like let loose, and chop it up. So that was cool. And then the other element is I stopped going. I didn't, I'm like you, I didn't feel that after about a year, I was like, hey man, like, thank you. Because what happened was this was a cognitive behavioral therapy, so it is, it's what they use in AA and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. But there's some value that goes into it, especially the key one for me is, key pillar is you have to believe in something greater than yourself,
Yes.
God, for instance, right? Like there has to be a spiritual component to it. So that's key. And then the other element is the introduction of mental models, like just having this toolkit that speaks to the solutions element that we were touching on earlier. Because it's really what it comes down to is like a solution. You don't want to feel coddled, like you need to go sit in someone's bosom every time your
Yeah.
feelings are hurt or you can't figure
Yeah.
something out, you know? So for me, it's like, I encourage every guy to seek out, you know, therapy. This even if you're at a stagnant point with business. I used it at a point like that. It's more of like a mentorship,
Yeah.
right? You know, you hit a wall. You know, the introduction of certain mental models can be applicable to different areas of your life. So you may get toolkits that, hey, I never thought about that. Never thought to map things out in that manner. And if you get like a good dope therapist that you generally can like make a friend and just have congruent values with, man, I mean, just think of it as an enhancement, not like a hindrance. So that's what I'll offer there. But yeah, I'm with you that I don't think it should be a lifelong thing in that regard.
Yeah.
But thanks, man. Great space. I'm working out right now. It's kind of loud, so I'm just going to go back to
All
listening.
righty, man. Good to hear from you. Yeah, great thoughts. So, John, did you have more anything else to say or to go back more?
No, I just got epically owned. No, that was great points by both. I think one thing, I think there was a little misinterpretation or
Nah, man, you didn't get owned, man. You just sounded like a 3D version of myself, man. So you definitely touched on a few things. Figure off you that, man.
No. You were spitting facts. No, I'm kidding. I think the one clarification I'll make was on the priest part was, I think we're in two different eras when we talk about that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In the modern era, you're definitely right about the difference between a therapist and a priest. I'm really kind of just referring to how it used to be. Like, there were no therapists, there were just priests.
Yeah.
And they fully understood your problems. Like, they were someone you actually like sat down with and talked to often enough that they would know, like, oh yeah, his dad had this problem and his grandfather had this problem, you know. So like, that's kind of why, that was kind of my point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But besides that, everything else basically hit the nail on the head. I have more of an understanding. I'm going to hold out as a contrarian and say that I think therapy is still bad and terrible, and I think it sucks. But
holding on, yeah, you got to hold on for dear life. Never give in on the internet.
Exactly, because you know what? Because at the end of the day, man, I just have such a high IQ. I can't be convinced by all you midwits. That's what it is.
Yeah. Me when I'm objectively correct and literally better than everyone else.
Exactly. Dude, you know what? I'm so much better than the tests too. I keep getting some shit grades on those tests, but I made my own IQ test. I don't want to brag. I'm not even going to say it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to even finish that thought.
Yeah. Too funny. Yeah. The priest part, I'll be quick, War Torn, and then you go ahead. Yeah. I mean, and that's where, like, if priests are more trained in like that sort of emotional component, they're trained in a lot of that stuff. They're trained very well, and they're directly connected to God. So that ultimately is like the answer. But if you know, probably back in the day too, there was probably some version of training of almost like the therapy training of the day, you know, just absent like Globo Homo. And, you know, nowadays it's just everything is just turbo obfuscated, especially in academia. But in theory, because, you know, especially because we're Christian, right? So Christianity is just correct to us. Like, there's no argumentation about that. So it would just follow that any version of this therapeutic relationship, this mentor relationship, has a Christian component to it, where, you know, if it's not the priest, you know, the therapist is heavily, you know, spiritually ordained in some fashion, or maybe it's just straight up like you're going to be a priest and, you know, a CBT therapist simultaneously, and you're going to integrate Christianity into it. So I'm fully with you on that. Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, it's going to come to a surprise to a lot of people, but myself, I'm agnostic. But even as an agnostic, I have to admit one thing, that a lot of people really do need a spiritual, a religious aspect in their life to have a set of boundaries, because I see this in a lot of retarded people and a lot of normies, that when they don't have it, they start to ask really stupid questions. When you see this a lot with what do you call it when people don't believe in God?
Secular
Atheist.
atheist.
Atheists. When they're atheists, they start asking really stupid questions like, can animals consent? And there has to be a limit to what is acceptable and what isn't, so you don't fall into those waters.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be real quick, and then you go ahead, Perp. This gets at, there's the gift of being a human is you have a transcendental spirit that is absent your neurology, absent your body, absent, and like you could really just, even like secularites need to even secularite types, like if I don't even mention any Christian words and all of that, I can speak to them about how, like, the things that we actually want for our lives to be happy, like, don't make biological sense, right? They're all very spiritual, abstract, and all of that. The pair bonding, retards try to make arguments about pair bonding and sex and reproductivity and how that affects our brain chemistry and everything. But, like, what is it to us that makes us just like have this word faculty and have this capability to think of things in the abstract and have these things to our personality that really we can't explain? And that is because we all have a transcendental soul and identity in each and every one of us. And it follows that part of arriving at that spiritual joy, fulfillment, happiness is to live for something beyond your transient bodily pleasures, feelings, thoughts, whatever. Even like higher order thinking, like cognition, whatever, career fulfillment and all of that. That stuff is still very like brain and biology and evolutionary psychology coded. But there's things that we can't explain about ourselves that don't have an ostensible biological purpose. So all that's to say that to arrive at that happiness, joy, fulfillment, it follows that to live for something, live for that spirit that is beyond you. And it's very clear that that spirit that is beyond you and within you is the spirit of God imbued into you. And so living by that and living for that yields you that much greater purpose and fulfillment. So yeah, absolutely good to bring that up. Perp, you go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I've really fucking enjoyed this. Like, we're 2 hours in, it's just been like banger after banger from you and from like the other speakers. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for that.
Thanks, Riley. Yeah.
Right, I've got a practical question and I've got a very abstract question. So let me do the practical one.
Okay.
So the practical one is, what is a concrete example? And obviously I know confidentiality, but maybe if you can sort of adumbrate the vague details and anonymize, what's like an example of where you've done something with a patient in your training which has differed from the mainstream, and like maybe if there was a little fly on the wall ready to shit lib, whatever, they'd have a fucking heart attack. Like, you can't do that. And also, relatedly, do you feel that because you're still in the training process and you've got to play ball a little bit, that you've had to like really constrain the way you've wanted to proceed with a patient, because you're still in the training process?
Yeah, well, yeah, so I certainly have, like, I can't like drop N bombs and stuff like that. I can't just like go full alt-right schizoid and all of that. And there's not even like a reason to do it, stuff like that anyway. Uh, so I do have to like play ball in terms of at least like social rules and that sort of thing. I can't drop like Jewish question stuff, and all that, because it just doesn't always even like apply, and that way would sort of get me like in trouble in many ways. But although at the same time I've kind of branded myself that way, so it really hasn't mattered too much. But in the training program, you have to like for example, right? Especially even though this is a Christian university, the transgenderism stuff, like they play the game of, well, you don't have to agree with it and you don't have to adjust your values, but the code of ethics says to, like, whatever, like, don't try to change that, don't shame them, don't try to change their value system and all of that. And one of the, like, I've had to write papers that basically just sort of glance over that and don't really address that. But like the Christian, the university makes the Christian ethos argument, and it's like the Christian position is no tolerance for evil. And like I don't, even people who are not Christian per se, like I would like I and let's say they think I'm evil, like I would want them to not have like it just makes sense as a person, like this gay idea that you have to tolerate anything and everything and everywhere. Like certainly don't like go around executing people and don't be like rude per se, but you do, you know, I've had to stop myself from trying to say, well, look, like we're Christians, we're on the side of God. That's just like correct. I'm a little bit more scared of fucking God than I am of, whether a tranny's feelings are hurt or something. But, just playing with in the world that we're in, you do have to sort of glance over that and restrain yourself. And then, what was your other question again? Was with
So
go ahead.
So like, is there a concrete example of where you've done something where if your assessors, if like a mainstream normie therapist was watching, they'd have a fucking heart attack? Like maybe you've had to give someone some tough love, or you've done something a bit unconventional, or you've shared something that bloody blah, I don't know, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I would say the most unconventional thing that I do is a lot of guys more so come to me for like the discipline fitness type stuff, and there is a therapeutic element to that wherein it is like you're gonna feel better, like you're not happy with yourself if you're not disciplined. Like that's just the nature of existence, and so they'll usually come to me for that. So really what I do that I would say is against the grain, so to speak, is I very fervently just advocate, here's what you do with the gym and stuff too. Here's the gym structure, how to make that a part of your mind and everything. And I really do give a little bit of a solution to that because, to Caesar's point earlier, a lot of the time, a lot of this is because people not only don't have a value system, but just sometimes can't parse value systems. The gym stuff, like a lot of guys, what I'll have to do is I'll have to explain to them to reorient their value system to avoid, like they should value the act and behavior of going to the gym in and of itself rather than like pleasantries, the consequences of the gym. And Redditors or whatever, especially coom brain Redditors, would lose their mind at the prospect of telling somebody not to coom or telling somebody how to stop themselves from valuing coom. So yeah, I mean, like even if I had like a code, like a secret midweight or whatever, a secret freak that stalks me on here that books me or something and then tries to, I don't know, surreptitiously records it or something to try to get me in trouble or something, I would say Reddit retards or psychology fags or whatever would get me in trouble for telling people you want to do the gym stuff, the discipline stuff, you have to reorient your perspective and reorient your value system. So great questions there. Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, on the topic of troons, it's really bad when you have to avoid certain subjects because how are you supposed to help people fix them if you can't fix them?
Yeah, and their argument against that would be that falsely presupposes that they need fixing. And of course it's all censored and everything, but I mean just like look at these people, and this is where you get into like empiricism fags. Like look, can I like articulate and describe it numerically or something? Like no, but you look at these people, there's obviously something fucking wrong with them. The suicide rates you could use to argue that, the history, homosexuals, they have a history of molestation. Like it just like you're going to tell me that that's not like their behavior is not consequential trauma reenactment or trauma pathology or something. It's just kind of like there's something wrong with that and wrong with that behavior, both morally and just like mental health wise. And so to your point, the unorthodox thing that I would do if any of those people approach me is I would say, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Like I actually really have to tread carefully on that because you could get your license revoked and everything. But, it'll be clear to them that I'm not of the position that that's just who you are. and that's not a pathological response to uh, some sort of emotional wound. So, Perp, you go ahead.
Okay, so this one is a bit nebulous, a bit philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
So we've sort of touched on, for example, priests, and like I gave the example, like working in the allotment, the garden with my grandfather. We've talked about like going down the fight gym and your coach. I think there's kind of this idea, and I don't know if this is libtarded or if it is, like, you tell me if you think it's true or false, but there's this idea of basically like, nobody has mental illness in Africa and everybody's family has 30 people that they see every single day, and they've got a big extended community. They live kind of closer to the state of nature. There's this idea that therapy is kind of almost a substitute for the community or for leaders like the priest or the mentor or like the absent father and stuff. So how true do you think that is? And then I'm going to be a bit cheeky and slide in another one, which is semi-related. There's also the idea that stuff like schizophrenia, for example, was actually like the village shaman kind of archetype.
Uh-huh.
I would also contend that potentially could be the case for autism and ADHD as well, but that's a separate thing. Do you buy into that at all? What's your opinion on like schizophrenia? And, you know, even like, when I lived in Australia, like you'd be in a fucking McDonald's. Sorry, I've let you down, but I'd be in McDonald's, full confession. And sometimes you get like these Aboriginal guys in the middle of fucking Sydney walk in and they'd be jabbering to themselves. But to be honest, like everyone just ignored them and like they never really attacked anyone. And it's almost like you can kind of imagine they're kind of closer to that tribal history, you know, just a couple generations back.
Uh-huh.
For them, it was almost just normal. They just walk around jabbering to themselves barefoot, but they didn't like attack anyone. Like nothing really happens. So anyway, so that's two things, is basically kind of the idea of the community, or sorry, therapy as a substitute for community. And then the other part was what your opinion is on schizophrenia and the shaman archetype and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, you make a good point. Like in theory, like if you have a good family, good community and everything, like you really aren't going to need much of any therapy. Like you're just not going to need to talk to somebody about your emotional wounds and everything because you're not wounded. The wounds come from relationships where people misalign and they misinterpret each other and all of that. Wounds come from just life experiences that wound our sense of self and self-esteem and all of that. But if you have like a very well-functioning society, community, family, and everything, you're really kind of like starting off without wounds. And so it follows that in theory, if you have like and it doesn't even have to be perfect. Let's just say like you didn't have many issues growing up or anything. And there are people evident like this, and these are the people who you just sort of like, you know, let's say with relating to men and women relating to each other example, right? Like these types of people like who grew up like that, they like genuinely just, they can't even fucking understand what everyone's problem is, you know, with how to relate to women or how to relate to men or something. They just like, they don't get it. Like they're like, what do you mean you're having trouble with girls? Like, I don't know, just talk to them. Like that's literally, and you'll see these guys, you know, somebody will try to say, not somebody here, but the counter argument is, well, that's because they're a Chad. Like people who aren't Chads are like this. So I'll say, to answer your question, in theory, with community and family and a functioning society that sort of has like a deeply embedded Christian value system and everything, like you're really not going to need much of any therapy. And then as for schizophrenia and autism and shamans and all of that, I think shamans are just people like, you know, religions replicate every society and develop in every society. And so it is just the nature of humanity, because we're imbued with spirit, to ponder beyond our existence. And, you know, whether the shamans are just straight up being spoken to by like Satan or demons or something like that, or maybe they're just almost like they really are sort of like functioning as the wisdom person, the person with that wisdom, the person that offers guidance and prescription and all of that. So, you know, the way that they become spiritual with it is, you know, maybe it's schizoid, I'm not sure, but it the way it becomes that because there's a natural proclivity for us to, when we are trying to reconcile our lives, part of that is having meaning, and the only way we can really arrive at meaning is some semblance of spirituality. And as for the guys like talking to themselves that are aboriginals and all of that, that's a really good question. I'm not too sure because, ostensibly, yeah, that is just like weird schizoid and all of that, but their world is so distant from ours. How do you develop a barometer for what's normal versus not normal? Another meme that the curriculum does is tells you to judge people within the context of their culture or something. So it's like, okay, well, you're just kind of like telling on yourself that you don't have like a centralized model for the human existence, and all of that. So when you come across those types, it might just be a belief thing. They're whatever religion they have, they might think that it's their duty or something to talk to themselves like that, like whatever it may be. But it's really tricky to identify what exactly that is, what function that serves. So great question. Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, community helps a lot. The biggest problem that people have these days is errors in the brain that come from isolation and being ostracized.
Yes. Yeah, and this is evident in like like emotional, like bullying and stuff like that, that does cause wounds that do make people become in need of a therapist, essentially. And especially because we do this human negativity thing of we judge ourselves for those types of things, and we judge ourselves for becoming wounded, especially men. And so that further develops it. Like it just sort of propagates as like a snowball effect, when there is no community and when there isn't like a good system. I mean, kids are inevitably going to bully each other all the time. It's like the evolutionary nature to try to like poke each other's ranks and try to like step up in the psychosocial ranks and everything. And if you're put down to the bottom too much, it is just like a value statement about you from others that will really wound you. So to your point, war torn, but with a healthy family and community, and even when that stuff happens, you have a community that polices that through values, through morality and all of that, and connectedness, you'll have a way to nip it in the bud. So great stuff. Perp, you could go ahead if you have more questions.
Believe it or not, I think that's pretty much it from me. But I do appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate that.
Yeah, nice. Of course. Absolutely. Great questions. Sometimes I run out of thoughts, and I'm pretty good at keeping going, as you could tell. But those are questions, questions like that are ones that I don't always think of. So yeah, thanks very much for that. Definitely we'll have you some more in our spaces. And like you said, our spaces here, and I got you one sec, V, our spaces here, it's crazy how enlightening these are. And that is because Marchese Methods is the fucking way. And key Marchese lieutenants, key Marchese generals are 5,000 IQ. And the only people on spaces and on the internet that have 5,000 IQ ideas and are just generally not fucking spurgs. If I see, I'm sure you guys have stepped into these other spaces, and it's like they're spurging, ego battles and like still talking about, 2016 era fucking stuff. That's not to shit on any of my fellow space hosts. They're great and they're genius and everything. They're key Marchese generals as well. But yeah, I love to hear it. Love to hear that kind of feedback. So V, you go ahead. Oh,
Yeah, cool. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
yes, sir.
Cool. Touch on what Perp said about how modern therapy is kind of a substitution for what we used to have. Could be priests, could be just a church where everyone goes on a Sunday and you see everybody in town, or whatever it may be. Working in the fields with people, more interaction, and like the isolation that
Yeah.
somebody just mentioned. Just want to touch on that, and I had two quick questions, and those would be: is modern talk therapy more beneficial for women, like sit on the couch and kind of talk about it, girl talk, and obviously base Christian therapy that everyone mentioned here would appeal more to younger guys. And my second question would be, is Globo Homo a result of the troons and kind of modern day issues that we have with chemicals and social media, etc.? Or is it the other way around and it's a huge top-down operation, kind of a propaganda campaign that
Yeah.
makes everybody that way?
Yeah, good questions. I'll say the rise of Troon and Globo Homo and gay butt sex and whatever the fuck, all the fat people and all that stuff. I'll say the rise of that is twofold. Firstly, there is a top-down influence there. It's obviously the fucking Chi-Coms. Like, ugh, it could never possibly be any other ethno-linguistic group. It's literally obviously the fucking Chi-Coms. It's top down because there's a thing they understand, and that is that the human tendency is to go with what feels good, to do what feels good and avoid what feels bad. And so this stuff like anti-fat shame and all that stuff, this propaganda combined to speak with the collective unconscious, which is much more integrated now because of the ubiquity of the internet, wherein everyone came together and sort of agreed we're not going to shame each other, because shame has been this existence that for people, shame for not living up to their own expectations, shame for not having a value and moral system. And so, but the answer to ameliorating that is to live a righteous and well done life. But of course, that requires work and that requires discomfort. So what did they proceed to do instead? The propaganda sort of communicated that it's okay to not be that. It's okay, actually. It just sort of artificially inserts, oh, well, you can just decide not to be ashamed about that. So they all went, yeah, heck yeah. And they're like, yes, I get to coom endlessly and not feel guilty about it. And I made a tweet about this where there was like a Reddit post where somebody basically said, yay, I'm not a Christian, and that means I get to coom endlessly. And that's the entire fucking ethos of all that stuff. So, for example, with the Troon stuff, like the reason this speaks to the Troon stuff is because Troonism is a self-protection. Simple pathology is, let's say you're a male to female. The pathology is, well, I'm rejected by women so much that if I make myself look like a woman, that way I can say, well, I'm not being rejected because I'm valueless. I'm being rejected because they think I'm a woman. And that's like the game. That's like a pathology to play there. And so what that does is it protects them from rejection, and people will lap that up and hold on to it for dear life because their ethos is feelsy badsies go away, feelsy goodsies come here. Now, ultimately, they're miserable, and because they don't want to deal with that, they find alternate routes, and this is how you just propagate into awful issues and low self-esteem and mental health issues. And so it is top down, and it spoke to the collective unconscious of people's tendencies to go with what feels good and avoid what feels bad. The fat stuff too, right? The fat stuff is, just food goon endlessly and convince yourself you're still sexy. But ultimately, they're miserable because the truth and its consequences exist irrespective of your acknowledgement of them. So if you're fat, but you're telling yourself you're sexy, and then, nobody dates you, nobody wants you, nobody pursues you, like, you're obviously going to be miserable. You're obviously going to feel valueless, and you're going to feel like unloved and all of that. And so that is, the inevitable consequence. But of course, they'll just come up with some other cope. So you asked another question, so and you raised your hand, so you go ahead, and then I'll let John go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Do you think that modern therapy, kind of more of the, you could say gayer style of therapy, is beneficial for women
Oh,
or
okay, yeah.
like younger? Yeah. And just real quick. Yeah. I had a friend who I knew and I went to school with, and he turned out to be MTF recently, and I was kind of shocked, but I saw it coming, and I was just caught off guard. I was
What's
like, wow,
NTF?
male to female.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just a little crazy because I heard about it and I see all this stuff online, and I'm like, it's so exaggerated. But then a friend of mine, it happened to, and I'm like, wow, like this stuff
And
is
this
real,
was
I
a
guess.
woman. Well, this was a male to female, but you're asking, is that just a separate question from the women therapy?
No, I was just adding that on
Okay.
because it was pertaining to the
Yeah.
topic. It was just, my anecdote. But yeah, so do you think that modern therapy is better for women and is base therapy? Because that obviously appeals to everyone here. It appeals to younger
Yeah.
guys. But yeah.
Yeah, modern therapy for women is, in theory, if it's like kind of like the premise here is if it's problem solving oriented, if it doesn't indulge in them, if it, integrates a Christian worldview, like I think it works for everybody and I would encourage it for everybody. I would say that the problem a little bit more unique to women is really like their discipline battle. Everyone's discipline battle is not relying on your feelings to inform your decisions and everything. But men have a couple of like more men's discipline battle is more so like the pleasure and addictive complexes. Women's discipline battle is making decisions and whatever absent feelings and not relying so heavily on their feelings to inform their decisions. And you don't want women to just become men by becoming like rational thinkers, fully rational thinkers. You want them to remain women, but there's like basically a maturity that would benefit them if they went to based therapy. But in the modern context, most of the time, just like most therapy in the modern context yields you just like indulgence in whatever gay little meme that they want to act out. And yeah, that male to female, that's a prime example of why people are terrified of therapy. It's almost like it feels like you go and they're going to like hypnotize you and make you a fucking Zogbot, if you aren't one already. And so it certainly is salient to, if that's the right word, to find that intimidating and all that. So good questions. John, go ahead.
Mr. Methods, great space, great space. Now, I have a question, and it's a little off topic, and I don't want to derail your methodizing. So is this a no questions off limits type space, or do we got to stay on topic here?
You could ask. You're an OG, so you could ask.
All right. I got my card. I got my methods card.
Yeah.
Now, all right. We got to address this bug question, all right? I got 2 spiders on the wall. They're invading my personal space. I want them gone. If I follow the methods, I should know that I need to let them raise a family and let them, grow and bloom. But I want them dead. So what's the deal here, man? Like what's going on? Can I kill these things or what?
Unironically, and this is kind of funny, some of you guys might have seen on my timeline, I really resent murdering bugs. Like, and I know, like, just, it's so funny. Like, I know you don't do this, but it's just so funny when masqueraded masculinity, beer and boobs, tough guys, like, just lose their fucking minds and just, like, eat it up the opportunity to, like, prove what a tough guy they are by saying kill the bugs, because what they're trying to say is, I'm tough and have no compassion, because that's like for women and feelings and all of that. But I really have I unironically have a very deep transcendental valuation of life, such that I really resent the idea of taking any life under any circumstance. And obviously, like, if somebody's pointing a gun at me, I'm gonna shoot them and everything, but I'm not gonna like it. I'm not gonna feel good about it. And in fact, if I shoot them and they're incapacitated, I'll go get my med kit and tourniquet them. And with bugs, I'll say, the meme people always say with spiders is, they eat other bugs. So there's that for you. And, I don't know. I've just always been, if I actually have to get a bug out of the house, I'll literally pick it up with a paper towel, let it live and then just put it outside. So that's the Marchese methods for the bug question.
Now, I understand that, but I am a coom brain, and my brain does coom every time I kill a bug. I get off, but okay, seriously though, there is in my mind, there's a hierarchy to everything, right?
Yes.
And so I am legitimately interested on your theorizing here because, I think you would admit that animals killing animals, thinning the herd, as they say, that is a kind of a part of life. That is the cycle of life.
Yeah.
Would you say that's inherently wrong that that's the case? Because that is nature.
Yeah, well, my contention with that is, but kind of definitionally, they do that, but they're beneath us. So it's sort of like them beneath us and doing that doesn't, like, we're expected to have a much greater, like, responsibility. So animals, kill, just thinking about it, like, animals kill each other, we kill animals, but animals, like, eat each other alive and, like, just have no regard for it. Whereas we, like, developed a super elaborate, sophisticated system to, like, whatever it is, like, shoot a bolt in a cow's head and try to make it as if, they don't even know for a millisecond that they're dying. So it would follow to say that, the Marchese ethos is, we're going to have to kill animals, but we don't have to like it. And our responsibility is to do it in the, like, most, I don't want to say painless because that's gay, but the most, like, I guess, respectful of their lives way possible. And not in, like, a Native American hoopty-goopty voodoo shit, but just in a way of, we really have to respect and value that they were imbued with life and their lives are all unique. And, like, people will try to meme me and be like, not that you're going to do this, but people will try to meme me and be like, oh yeah, well, you kill bacteria in your mouth every day, and you kill animals by eating them every day. And I'm like, yes, and every day I wrestle with the conflicting values of, like, my health and the bro gym stuff. Like, I value that deeply, and I also value their lives simultaneously. And every day I just kind of live with wrestling with this sort of eternal middle ground I'm going to have to live with that. So I know you got.
Man, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that right to you. I would say my counterpoint to that is this idea that, like, because you bring up the Native Americans, right? The voodoo, whatever stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why are they so weird about it? Because they believe that animals have an equal soul to ours. What's the difference between us and them? We know that humanity was imbued with a soul,
Yeah.
a higher soul, and that animals have a lesser soul. And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I bring everything back to religion, but it is kind of the center of everything, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But we, Adam and Eve were given the specific responsibility to name all the animals, take care of all the animals, whatever, and to do with those animals as they must, right? Like, it is our goal to tend to the animals, right? And that means thinning the herd if need be. That means, consuming them if need be, because truly, it, we need it to survive. And everything that is healthy, everything that builds us, that grows us, which are made in the image of God, is inherently good, right? So
Yeah.
how could you grapple with something that is inherently good?
Yeah. Well, it's simultaneously, like, God created them and created their life, and life is the most complex expression of God. So even though their lives are certainly worth less than ours, their lives still warrant a great semblance of respect. And to your point, you're right that it's wrong to equivocate their lives with ours. But the key thing is that because we are above them, we are also tasked with behaving less savagely than them, or less stupidly, or less animalistically, basically. So we certainly can't equivocate their lives to ours, but the fact that their lives are still complex expressions of God's creation, it follows that do what you must, right? So that means, you don't always have to kill the spiders if they're in your house. It's a do what you must. So it means, when you must, then that's when you do that. And you do it in a way that is above the way that they would do it to you, even though they would have no problem ripping you to shreds if they'd like. I know you probably have a response to that, but Wartorn's been waiting for a while, so Wartorn, you go ahead.
Yeah, in my eyes, there should always be a reason why you're doing something. Obviously, you will have to kill eventually. So there has to be a good reason to why you're doing it. And I think the biggest problem that we have with, these days is because things are so easy. You just go to the store and you buy meat and you forget the step of the animal that was killed so you could consume it. Back in the day, you would have to look at the animal in the eyes as you're killing it, and you understood the value of the animal and the thing that it was sacrificing so you could continue. Like, when you kill an animal, you take part of it into yourself. So in a way, it continues in you. So spitting on that is you spitting on yourself, technically.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, you could go ahead if you have another response.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say like spitting is not necessarily the correct thing here, right? Like I'm simply talking about using animals as they were given to us, which is to serve us. I'm a hunter. I grew up hunting. It's also a fact that without humanity hunting, let's say deer, they would overeat, they would overpopulate, and then there would be like a mass deer starvation. Like this is kind of a part of like basic, high school eco-science.
Yeah.
You learn that. But
Yeah.
like, that's kind of a good example of like our purpose on this earth as predators. But I would say, like, I would ask, is your main contention basically that people just enjoy it too much?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, there's a weird thing I see where people, especially these like faggot types, they just sort of get off on the power they feel from taking another life, and it's also always like a tacit sexual advertisement. They read in like Men's Health magazine or something at some point in their lives that, women freaking like when you're like a freaking provider. So, and it's like deep psychology, bro. So it's like if you kill animals in front of her and if you're eating meat in front of her, that like tells her brain that you're like a hunter provider. And these guys will literally read that and then they'll just be, prance around being like, yeah, I freaking kill animals. And they just like have this gay like power trip over it. I would say my contention is every combination of getting off on it and doing it needlessly. I know needlessly isn't really all that often of a problem and all of that, but like you said, you have to hunt deer to keep them from overpopulating and all of that. The later and greater compassion is to foresee what they don't in their overpopulation. So it's just sort of like a thing where like I know we do it. I know we have to do it, but I'm not going to like it, and I'm not going to use it as a gay advertisement to try to get women to have sex with me.
Okay, so so you don't even disagree with me necessarily. You just don't like people flaunting spider crushing.
Well, that and like I don't see why you can't just take it outside.
Well, it's fucking scary. That's why. All right.
As we're saying this, I remember that you're scared of spiders.
Me? No. They're just so degenerately below me that I can't be seen touching them.
Yeah, too funny. All right, yeah, that was a good sidebar. Perp, you go ahead and feel free to, if you had more questions about therapy, feel free to bring that in.
Yeah, the only thing I have right now, just to add on to that, I mean, so John, like, I think there's the common thing is it in the hair inventory for psychopathy, psychopathy, did this person harm animals when they were kids? And that's like a very kind of objective, like empirical thing where it's just, there is a correlation between, say, people hurting animals as a child or say like setting buildings on fire and psychopathy. And that's just an empirical fact regardless of where you stand on a moral or ethical view. Like even if you think there's no value to animals or whatever, no religious qualms, just like as a matter of empiricism, it predicts future behavior. So I know that's a different point to what Marquez is saying, but you can infer things about people's future behavior or their personality from, say, do they undertake certain actions? And also, even if they do undertake it, how do they feel about it? Like, do they kill the bug but feel bad? And they're like, oh, I had to, or like it was a fucking poisonous spider and it was the only safe way to do it. Or is it like, I was completely harmless and also I think I'm like a badass for like, squashing a bug. Look at me, I'm such a G, that kind of thing.
That's a very good point. I'm trying to formulate my counterpoint in my head, but I know that, it might come across as, smart to you guys, but I know for a fact that Mr. Methods is going to immediately know that I'm being a hypocrite and that I definitely showed early signs of psychopathy. So I am going to plead the fifth on this one. I'm going to take a step back and say, you're probably right. And just ignore my previous points. I'm stepping down on that one.
Too funny. This is so funny. It's so funny to like, key Marchese generals. We always do meme about like when we're just kind of like we don't have anything to say. It's so funny when Spurgs are eternally trying to keep up like an online image and have to like have an answer for everything. It's just like, I don't know, or like, just like Chad, yes, on some things sometimes. People seem to forget the value and sort of the funniness of that. So, Wartorn, you go ahead, and then, anybody else, if you have any lingering questions about therapy after what Wartorn says or whatever, or any earlier conversations, feel free to bring it up. Wartorn, you go ahead.
I have a lot of knowledge on this type of subject because it was the thing that I studied. Psychopathy is divided into two types, the sub-Qs and the high Qs. The sub-Qs, they don't have any control, they lack control, so they might crush puppies or they might do dumb things because they don't have the control for their urges. The high Qs, on the other hand, are different because everything in their life has to be a give and take relationship. So they could do the things that they have urges for, but it's more like, if I do it, what do I gain from it? If I don't gain anything from it, then it's a waste of time.
Very interesting. Is that you, John? Is that you? Are you contemplating the payoff of crushing spiders?
I just want a clean, orderly house, okay? I just want everything to be nice and pristine and clean and perfect. I want it to be perfect. And I don't want anything getting in my way.
Comorbid OCD, love that.
Yeah, literally doing the
little dark tetrad type beat over here.
Yeah, doing the meme. I don't remember you killing bugs though. Maybe it's just been such a minute that was that like
It's probably the trauma, dude. It was the trauma from the disgusting, despicable things I would do to those bug carcasses. That's probably why you have this opinion today.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is this early classical John theory?
You know what? It wasn't classical John theory, but I do remember a very, very proto Marchese Methods discussion about this topic, and I think you specifically said that I was a sick motherfucker. I think that was the concluding thoughts on that conversation.
That was the one of the founding doctrines of Marchese Methods is John Lezak is a crazy motherfucker or sick motherfucker.
Yeah, I was patient zero to the methods.
That was the foundational model for my entire bug ethos that I have to argue with all these retards on X4. You did the world great work by showing me that.
Exactly, and the problem is I'm still at large today. And I got 3 victims looking at me right now. Who knows what I'm doing to them?
Yeah, my patient zero was the one patient I couldn't get through to stop from executing spiders, and now I just have a lifelong mission to get people to chill on murdering bugs.
Exactly.
Too funny. Anybody else? Any lingering thoughts, feelings, perspectives? Does it feel to you guys like you gained a different perspective on therapy, psychology, and all of that? I feel it seems to me like everyone in here came in with like some thoughts that were vastly different from the things that I said. So floor is yours if you thought of some things differently or learned something.
Yeah, well, I never doubted you, so that your therapy is based in red pill and stuff.
That's right.
But yeah, just maybe, yeah, maybe it's not that rare to find a good therapist, and I was just unlucky and shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's you'll find one, and maybe now you'll have an understanding of what you're going in to do, and what kind of therapist you really want, which is me, of course, and could only ever be me. Like you said, Marchese Methods is the panacea. It's the panacea. Marchese Maxing is the panacea to all things life, therapy, and so forth. So, anybody else? Do you have any new thoughts, perspectives? You know, uh, are any of you guys now have different thoughts on therapy? Are you thinking of trying it for the first time now, or trying it again, or something along those lines?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for hosting the space. I found it very interesting, and that definitely made me consider different activities in my life that could be therapy or that I could view as therapy. And yeah, because I tried the whole traditional one, the modern day, non-based therapy didn't really work out super well for me.
Yeah.
I stopped doing it a while ago, so it was eye-opening, and I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you. Yeah, I mean, if you don't go through me, like you can literally just look up Christian therapists too, and that just like is a huge and helpful filter with Lobo Homo and everything.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely thinking of getting back into church, picking up the Bible. It's never a bad idea to do that ever.
So true.
So anyway, thank you. I hope you guys have a good night or whatever time zone you're in. So
Yeah, thank you, brother. You too.
yeah. Bye
All
bye.
right, take care. Alrighty. Perp, what are your thoughts? What are you walking away from this space with?
Uh, it's kind of made me a bit more inclined. So like I'm not in therapy right now. It's maybe made me a bit more inclined to, because, you don't really lose anything by giving it a try. Maybe, a couple of things, but, yeah, it is difficult because, especially I'm in England and it's like even more like cucked over here.
Yeah,
And like when Caesar was saying some really interesting stuff about like he was doing therapy, but like most of the time they were just like at a fucking batting cage or, going out doing an activity. And that's kind of one of those things I hear. And I'm like, only in America you're going to get shit like that. Cause here it would be like, literally it would be like the bare bones of some overstaffed like public practitioner, not like a private practice most commonly. So yeah, I think it's just given me like a millionth reason that I need to like get across to America and get the fuck out of here, to be honest.
let's go. Let's go. Yeah, it's really bad over there. Being American, like, to your point about like the limitations of availability and everything, like it is like such a crazy experience to be like, American, and just like anything you could want, think, or feel, or do, or whatever is just there available to you. And then like you go even just like to Mexico or Canada, and so many things are still so limited in supply or whatever. And so, yeah, that's a great thing, you know.
So we'll give it a year. When you're qualified, I'll come across. All right.
There we go. Well,
Awesome.
I still do coaching right now. I do one-on-one coaching. You could check my website and browse a little for that. I also have a Discord that is $5 US a month, which is sort of like you're texting me. It's sort of like, but the payoff is you have access to me all day, every day. You can kind of text me your questions, thoughts, feelings, and so forth. And it's, through messages. The coaching is face to face video. I do $50 for a singular session, but if you do four ahead of time, it's $120 for for Americans. So the reason I mentioned that to you is because when I'm licensed in America, that stuff doesn't matter because people's insurance can pay me, but I don't know if, you have an insurance that would be willing to pay me and everything. So that would be the relevant part. So, yeah. So, alrighty, War Torn, any final thoughts? Still,
No, I'm good.
no, you're good. John, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say in terms of changed opinions, change opinions, not really. I'm not going to do therapy. I'll stand with that. Although I will say I don't discount it. I think it works for some. I think if you have the right guy, you can kind of get to the root of your problems. I will just say, I'll just reiterate my original point, which is that I don't think anybody should use it as a crutch.
Yes.
I think kind of going to a guy and repeating the same shit over and over and over again, and then he repeats the same feel good like solution over and over and over again, and then you go away feeling all high, and then you just do the same shit the next week. I think that's kind of a problem. I think it's a huge problem in society. It's
Yes.
probably always been the case. That's probably always been a thing. But I just think that's kind of normie Zogbrat, brain, sludge brain, blah, blah, blah. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like our basic condition, but I don't think it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Yeah, no therapy gooning. No
Damn right.
no talk gooning, no relationship gooning. So, absolutely well said. I'll say my final thoughts here are the operative starting point is eyes on the prize. Perp kind of said something along those lines of, there's no harm in trying it. And so, uh, what else are you going to do is sort of another version of that. And I'll say ultimately it requires base therapy, which is, facilitated by Marchese Methods, marchesemethods.com for that. And, you kind of have one life, one time frame, you have literally nothing better to do other than to try to ameliorate your issues, problems, and your life, and you can certainly go with a healthy sense of skepticism. You don't want to get, the orb of confusion, the trans orb of confusion turned onto you, Zog slop, whatever the fuck they say to you. So ultimately, it's really just Marchese maxing, and Marchese methods is the answer. So those are my final thoughts there. So thanks everyone for joining. This was like top three right here. This was goated. Long one too, so that's good. A lot of content. So thanks everyone for tuning in. MarcheseMethods.com. You could DM me if you have any questions or anything like that too.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers, Marquise.
Alrighty, cheers.
Cheers, love.